but it's come to my attention that we need to clean a couple things up. Commissioner Crank?
Commissioner Culver, we worked really hard to try to do it right and didn't get it done, so. I'd move to reopen the consideration of Chapter 6, the deer regulations.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor of reopening the deer?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Deer, Chapter 6 is reopened.
What Commissioner Schmidt and I were trying to do was make the closing dates for all areas in Region G and H the same, and we didn't quite get that done. So my motion would be that, the first motion would be that Chapter 6 reflect that all closing dates in Regions G and H be closed for deer hunting on October 6th. And that way you won't, I mean, that's what we're trying to do, is prevent what we understand is a problem, that once the high country closes, many people go to Area 135 and it's leading to dangerous situations or not very good hunting experiences for folks in 135. So this would solve that problem.
I just looking here real quick.
Mr. President, in terms of
We've got a motion on the floor. We'll need a second before discussion, Doug. Can we have a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Go ahead, Doug.
Mr. President, members of the commission, there are a couple of limited quota areas that are within those two regions, and so it may be more appropriate to have the motion pertain to the general license areas, because there's in those two regions there's limited quota areas, and they would, basically they have a different opening date and they're limited quota, so it's not critical that the season length be so restrictive in those limited quota areas.
Thank you, Doug. Mr. President, if I could amend my motion?
Okay.
I would so amend my motion to move that all general season areas within Regions G and H close on October 6th. And I'm not in any way trying to affect any limited quota areas that may exist in Regions G and H by making that motion. Those would be as they're presently set forth in the regulations.
And Commissioner Anselmi, are you agreeable to amend your
Agreeable to
second?
amendment, thank you.
Okay. One point of clarification. Is it your intention to bring up antler point restriction with a different?
Yeah, I believe that'd be probably the most appropriate. We deal with antler point restrictions in a second motion.
Okay. So the motion's been made and seconded. Any other conversation, any discussion? If not, I'll call for the question. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Sherry, you got who made that motion and seconded? Okay.
Mr. President,
Yes.
Mr. Choma pointed out that we had not formally adopted the antler point restriction, which, as I understand, is uniformly kind of supported out there to protect that age class of bucks as they go forward, and try to prevent the problems caused by the massive fawn die-off we have. So I would move that Chapter 6, we adopt Chapter 6 as previously amended, which would include both the closing date on October 6th and the reduction of non-resident licenses in both Regions G and H. And then with this last motion that we adopt the antler point restriction, which I believe is no one can kill a deer unless it's 3 points or better. And with those three amendments, then, well, I'd make a motion that we adopt the antler point restriction and Chapter 6 as amended prior to that last motion.
A second?
Second.
Galen seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So I think we're up to speed. We're done with deer.
Moving right along. So we're in chapter 7, and starting off with by region, the limited quota license changes that are proposed for, or the totals for the regions. So we're starting off with Jackson. As proposed, we have an increase of 100 in the Jackson region, increase of 150 in the Cody region, 355 in the Sheridan region, 130 in the Green River region. Laramie, decrease of 100. Lander, a decrease of 75. Pinedale, an increase of 300. And then Casper, an increase of 125. And if you look at that on a statewide basis on those type licenses, the limited quota licenses, we have an overall increase of 725 limited quota licenses. And the harvest last year was nearly 26,000 elk at 45% success. And as I mentioned, that's a pretty phenomenal success rate and harvest level for elk. And hunting remains really good for elk in Wyoming. And here's the 10-year harvest trend to give you a perspective. And again, there's some discussion earlier about how these estimates are made. And so, you know, the agency has a statistical, there's a statistical sample of all license holders. And so not everybody gets sampled, but they statistically select a sample from all the licenses that are sold. And then these harvest estimates are derived from those people that participate in that survey. And so on the herd unit basis, we're looking at, you know, the accuracy on that. It's highly reliable, and it's accurate within plus or minus 10%. And so it's a good, all of our managers feel very comfortable with this on a herd unit and a statewide basis. This is a very accurate, and it's a much cheaper way to estimate harvest than it would be to go out and try and census every single person that had a license. That would be cost prohibitive, and it would be really difficult for the agency to accomplish that. It's the same thing as like an exit poll from a voting booth. You know, there's a certain level of confidence that you put into those after they run one of those in terms of how many people voted and what they project with that. It's pretty similar. So under Chapter 7, common themes and concerns that were raised at the Jackson meet or at all the meetings, starting with Jackson. There's conflicting opinions on the proposed general license any elk hunting in Hunter Area 78. And we'll spend a little more time on this after I get through these. But we initially proposed an any elk season. And again, the field managers went to all the landowners that provided hunting opportunity in that part of in that hunt area to kind of basically bounce the idea off that this was a proposal. And last fall, after the hunting season, they had enough interest that they wanted the agency to move forward with that general season, and that's what we proposed initially here. Cody, the issues are fewer elk in the gooseberry elk herd, and there was a request for additional Type 9 licenses. Casper, there's some concern with late elk hunting seasons and partitioning of bull harvest by public and private lands in Hunt Area 117. There was also concerns regarding the decreasing archery season pressure in Hunt Area 19 to promote elk distribution on public lands for the rifle season opener. So basically those elk are shifting because of some of the hunting pressure. Lander, there's conflicting opinions regarding the spikes excluded seasons in Hunt Areas 67 and 68. So following the public meetings, these are what we ended up proposing because of the issues that were raised. So if you look at Jackson, we changed the any elk general season in Hunt Area 78 to antlerless elk, to general antlerless elk season on private land. We also added a Type 2 for any elk on private land, and that the dates for that would be from August 15th to October 31, and that'll be in your draft regulation that we have. In Cody, we added 10 Type 9 licenses to Area 154, in 54, and then we maintained the opening date for Type 1 licenses in Area 41. And there was some interest by the field managers to open that season a little bit earlier, but due to public comment and landowner concerns, they moved that back to the opening date that you'll see in your packet. So there's basically it's last year's season. In Lander, the changes that we made were to provide spikes excluded during a portion of the hunt season so that those publics that still wanted to have spikes protected would be still, they would still have some satisfaction there, but also we would allow a portion of that season to be open for any elk. Some of the emerging issues that we see into the future in the Jackson, it's basically how to appropriately monitor and manage the various segments of the Jackson elk herd. Cody, the elk working group there, will be meeting again to review data and discuss potential changes to Hunt Area 60, some of the backcountry. Sheridan, continue to explore options to increase harvest of elk on private lands and landlocked public lands. Green River, hunters are increasingly concerned about reduced elk numbers in both the Sierra Madre and West Green River herds. The Lander region, continued vigilance on elk numbers throughout the region, but in particular the Wiggins Fork and the Ferris herds. In Hunt Area 100, 118 elk harvest addressing landowner concerns as well was an issue there. And with that, I would like to turn it over to, we have with us today, Matt Wilbur is the Snake River supervisor for Grand Teton National Park, and he would like to give you an overview of the elk reduction program in Grand Teton National Park. And with that,
Welcome, Matt.
Good afternoon, President Culver, Director Talbot, members of the commission. Thank you for having me. As Doug was saying, just giving you a brief overview of the elk reduction program within Grand Teton National Park. This will be areas 75 and 79. Working off of the objectives set by the Bison and Elk Management Plan from 2007, the Jackson herd, we're looking at maintaining at 11,000. Elk, we are currently at objective based off of this summer's counts. The National Elk Refuge winter objectives on feed being 5,000 or less. We're above that at the moment by quite a bit. And then the summer bull ratio, 35 bulls per 100 cows. We're slightly below that. I believe we're sitting at right at 32. We'll see that on the next slide. And then our specific summer herd in Grand Teton, 1,600 elk expected, and we're just below objective on that as well at the moment. Okay, so this is from Science Resource Management, just a brief slide on the areas that they flew and where their counts were. A lot of the elk were up north at the time of the counts during the summer. As we see, we've got the 32 mature bulls per 100 cows, and they counted a total of 1,051 this summer, but there was a little weather, so that may be a little skewed, that number. Last year, 2016, Hunt Area 75, we had the season, was 22nd October to the 11th of December, and a shortened season on Antelope Flats, which is basically a chunk of land just north of Antelope Flats Road that shuts down on November 30th. We had 625 tags total, 125 were Type 4, full price, and 500 were the Type 6 or reduced priced. 79 was again opening date, the 22nd October. It shuts down much earlier, October 31st. The 75 Type 4s can be used in both fair cost. What's being proposed for the 2017 season for Hunt Area 75 is a little bit of a delay in opening, October 28th, and closing down December 10th. The Antelope Flats would remain the same, shutting down on the 30th. The number of tags total does not change, 625. but the distribution is a little different. 75 for a type 4 and 525 for the type 6. And that's partly due to, when we go down to hunt area 79, that timeline has been reduced from October 28th to the 31st. So there's only a 4-day period for hunt area 79. The last 2 years, we've only had 9 animals taken out of there, and it's also not necessarily the population we're looking at working. So a couple changes from the last couple of years. We're going to try to maintain, let's see what's going on here, for 2017, the limit of 7 rounds per day per hunter. 1 shot fired at a running group of elk instead of multiple shots. The required use of non-lead ammunition, we've been into this for a few years now, seems to be taking hold and is working very well. Snake River bottoms have been closed. This would, I believe, be the 4th season for that. So basically Deadman's Bar south to Ditch Creek. Along those bottoms would be closed to hunting again this year, and replaced by the Grovant River bottoms, which have been open now. This would be the 4th season for that. So basically Grovant Junction east towards Grovant Campground, so adjacent to the National Elk Refuge. Okay, I guess that's all I have, unless you have any questions for me or concerns.
Any questions for Matt? Mark?
Mr. President, what was the success rate up there?
I believe it was right around 20%. We had 124 animals taken, I believe, last year.
You got 600 tags, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good presentation, thank you.
Doug, could I stop you for just a minute? We've had some additional people join us, and I wanted to remind everybody that if they would like to address any of these chapters, at the back of the room, Janet, waving her arm there, she has these blue sheets. If you would fill one out, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. President, members of the commission, so I thought it'd be appropriate to provide a little more clarification, which I know a lot of you have been already contacted by individuals regarding Hunt Area 78, and so I offered to provide a little bit of clarification if you guys would desire that. And so
Let's stay with 75. I like this one.
75, this year it's easier. So basically 78, the field managers again went out, canvassed everybody that participated in that hunt. Last year they had pretty solid support amongst the landowners, and then during the fall we drafted up the non-resident packet that you saw online, and then so in December we finalized that because we still had that public support. In January, of course, the non-resident application period, so we did have people that those ranches had kind of been contacting, applied for that on a general license. I think one of the emails you got this morning suggested that one of the ranches had 15 individuals that drew a general tag this year to hunt. Following our season-setting meetings in March, we started to hear some concerns, and during the public commenting process, you guys saw the packet of information that you have before you that suggests that there's some real concern regarding the general license nature of those hunt areas, both from some residents that live there felt that there would be a more participation from hunting. The ranches basically viewed this as an opportunity for them to increase their pool of people that might be available that could hunt on their property. So those ranches are all very selective in who they let out there to hunt. It's not an open area for anybody to go out and hunt. And so the ranches highly regulate who they select to go out there. And so over the years, they felt that if we went general season, they would have more people in the community that they know are safe hunters that they could allow to come out there and hunt. Right now, with the limited quota hunt, there was a real limited number of people. And so sometimes when there was elk available for harvest, they didn't know any of the people that had licenses, and they were reluctant to let them on to hunt. So after our public meetings, and we had some negative comments from a couple of the landowners, we opted to modify our regulation or our proposal for Chapter 7 to just be a general license antlerless season and we added a type 2, which would be for bulls on private land. The general season would only be allowed to run from August 15th to October 31, and those hunters would basically have to be invited to be on private land because there's only a handful of ranches that allow that. But under a general season structure, there's some of those smaller homeowners out there that have some 40-acre parcels that would still participate in that hunt because they wouldn't be able to draw the limited quota license, but they would still be able to pick up a general license and still participate in that hunt. So our original recommendation was any elk through October 31. We backed off to antlerless elk through October 31 with a type 2. And that is in the regulation you see before you is the proposal for an antlerless elk, and that was because the public commenting that we received up until the point that this packet was drafted for you guys, we wanted to have it addressed. It may not be the version that you have, but it's the latest version of this regulation is an antlerless elk general season with a type 2. I'm sorry, the one that you have there is probably the original.
Yeah,
The
so,
original draft.
excuse me, could you go, I'll write that down, so can you,
Okay.
the general is August 15th to
To
10/31.
October 31,
and that's just.
and we
that-
switched it, because of public comment, we switched it to antlerless elk only.
But originally, so in the packet, it showed,
It showed an opening date of August 15th and a general license any elk. It did not have any closing
so we
dates.
changed two things. We changed the
Well, the
proposal.
closing date was something that we had worked on continuously, but and we, in the packet, it wouldn't have been identified, but when we drafted that initial regulation that we took to the public, it was November 15th.
And it was any elk. So the people got the packet, and if they drew a general license, they're assuming they're gonna have an any elk.
They were assuming they were having a general season. That's correct.
And then the type 1,
The type 1 last year was 75, and in the proposal we were looking at, and originally we were going to drop that back to 50 because we were going to go general license. But when we modified this proposal, we went back to 75 type 1s. So it's antlerless elk through October 31. Type 1 was August 15th through October 31, the type 2. The type 1 ran through the month of January, and that's 75 licenses is our current proposal
For any elk, right?
for any elk on that type 1.
so the type 2's antlerless.
Type 2 can be, it's a full price license, and it's for any elk.
I'm sorry.
But it was limited to private land only, and it ended on October 31. And so there's less incentive for people to really seek those licenses because they're going to be at a time frame when it's resident elk in that area, and those are the bulls that cause a lot of the problems, the hay fields and private lands.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Pete.
you've got me totally confused. 78, when I'm reading through here, I mean, it's nothing of what you're saying.
Yeah, so the draft that you guys have was one that we drafted
Yeah,
for the public meetings, and so we modified that since receiving public comment to address
I
concerns that were.
understand that part, but even what you're replying back, you were saying that 78 type 1 is October 15th to, in the book, it's September 25th.
But then you go down and.
I'm sorry, let me grab the.
And
You
you
go
said
down-
an October 31st closing somewhere, and I don't see October 31st anywhere on here.
Jesus Christ.
Okay, so 78. It was what we proposed originally was August 15th and November 15th for general, any elk on private land. And then we had a type 1, that was August 15th to September, that's supposed to be, that should be January 31.
Well, part of it's off national forest and part of it's in the entire area.
Oh, I'm sorry, yep, you're in the entire area. So it's off national forest, so then again, it focuses that pressure on private land. And then that same license type becomes valid then September 26th to January 31, any elk valid in the entire area. And then the type 6s remain the same as last year, and the type 7, we decreased that by 25 licenses. Everything else remained the same.
Created a type 2.
So after receiving public comment,
No, then you come down here, just one's an entire area.
we
one's
added a
an
type
extra-
2
still-
with 50 licenses,
Yeah, but that's just off national. forest.
and we moved the type 1s back up to 75 because they would run through the month of January and still have some opportunity to reduce elk numbers.
Forest there, so it's-
And then because of the public concerns there, we opted to move away from that any elk season towards an antlerless season. And that was the result of the public comment and the feedback we were getting until just recently.
I think it's this one.
We probably should have had this printed out there or something.
And then I may provide a little more clarification that some of the comments that you've gotten over the past few days, which were not included in your official packets because they were kind of outside the time frame of when we typically solicit comments, but we're still taking those comments, that there was a number of landowners that expressed concern that they did have those hunters putting in for those an any elk season on a general license, and so some of those folks would have burned up their preference points because a lot of those are non-resident hunters because they secured a place to hunt prior to applying.
Mr. President, so 2 questions. The first one is, do we have any other glitches like this in any of the elk regulations where, you know, we put out information to the non-residents for the non-resident draw, and now we're changing gears at you know, and yeah, where we've dramatically changed the season structure like we have here? Are there any other examples of that in these elk regulations?
Mr. President, Commissioner Crank, I am not aware of any other hunt areas that came across that problem because, you know, field guys try to really canvass their constituents before they draft up that packet, and the packet still allows us to have some manipulate the quotas and the closing dates.
Yeah.
But in this case, this all came on since the public meetings when some of the landowners had some second thoughts on this type of season structure.
So this is the only elk area where we have a major change, what I would characterize as a major change, where we went from a general license allowing people to kill any elk to a different structure that would not allow them to do that with a general license.
Yes, that's the only one that I'm aware of.
And so I would guess these people that put in, these out-of-staters who put in for area 78 general a general Wyoming license, presumably to hunt on the Reeser Ranch or the Lucas Ranch, now have to go hunt in Spread Creek or some other general elk area. They could not use that license where they had intended to hunt and had obtained permission.
That's correct, Commissioner Crank.
Okay, and can we identify those people? I mean, I guess one landowner has said there's 15. Can we? I mean, would it be easy for us to identify those people who based on our publication that a general elk license would allow someone to hunt on the Snake River Ranch or the Lucas Ranch, have put in and obtained a general license, you know, and probably burned up their preference points to do so? Could we identify those people that actually have detrimentally relied on our earlier publication?
Mr. President, members of the commission, in order to identify, because the number of general license hunters, we have no idea their intent, where they're going to hunt, but certainly the ranch knows who those people are, and you know, I'm sure they have their names and the contacts.
And I guess we could have them file an affidavit saying that they did that. I mean, or some proof, they could provide some proof to us that they had done that. I would guess. Is that?
Yeah.
Maybe to give a heads up to Mr. DeWald, I'm wondering, Mr. DeWald, if we change the season, so I guess the commission has an option. We could stick with the general license, which the landowners don't want and everyone seems to be dissatisfied with. Or we could go with the proposal the department has now made based on further input, and I'm glad you took that further input. But would the commission have any ability to remedy the prejudice we may have caused these 15 people or so that put in for general licenses believing they were gonna be able to hunt on the Snake River Ranch or the Lucas Ranch and now can't do that and have burned up their preference points? Does the commission have any authority to allow them, for instance, to turn their general license in and go back to status quo where they could apply next year? I know they're screwed this year, but they could apply next year for that license if they really wanted it.
Certainly. President Culver, Commissioner Crank, the License Review Board would generally handle things of that nature. So the commission has delegated that authority to the License Review Board to review requests on a case-by-case basis. And that's in Chapter 44. But you could certainly provide some direction to the department if you felt that people had reasonably relied upon an earlier statement by the department that there could be this upcoming season, with the understanding that the public is generally aware when they apply that this is just a proposal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I learned something today. I didn't know we had a license review board. Who is on the license review board?
So I think we have 3 people on the License Review Board. That would be Mr. Nesvik, Mr. Kennedy, and Ms. Cole.
Wow, that's a hard crew to deal with.
They are very
You think they might accept direction from the commission?
individuals.
There's always a chance, a first chance.
Thank you for your information, Mr. DeWell.
Mr. President and Commissioner Crank, I may provide a little additional clarification to that. We were under the impression that not all of the ranches were opposed to the general season structure here lately, because some of them still supported having an opportunity for general license holders to come out. So it's kind of a, I don't know if it's an even split, but there's certainly the largest ranch to the west, the Snake River Ranch supports it, and the ranch north of the Grovont, the Serenity Ranch, does support it. But Lucas has had some concerns with it and asked that all general licenses be removed from the regulation.
And at least Mr. President, based on my communications with Bill Reeser, who I've known for years, I think he emailed the commission. I know he emailed you, Doug. He's okay with going either way, is what I understand from Mr. Reeser at this stage, which is the Snake River Ranch, correct? Which is the largest end holding in Area 78, as I understand it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's correct.
Okay.
And
Mr. President?
Yes.
Everyone who's contacted me about this, I want to make sure that this is on the record and you guys understand this. Everyone that's contacted me about this praised the Game and Fish and our people in Jackson for the effort they put into trying to figure this out. It's just a difficult area where you have 1,500 elk living in an urban area, essentially of 40-acre ranchettes, and it's impossible for us to control that population. And so it's an exceedingly difficult situation, but everyone praised the department and your efforts that you put into trying to solve this. So I want that known. And I commend you for that effort and that time.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Doug, so how are you gonna handle these type 2 tags now? You're gonna reopen that up for application?
Yes, so, Mr. President and Commissioner Dubey, the limited quota licenses would not have been in the non-resident draw for the application period in January, but they would become available during the regular application period that's coming up following this meeting. So people could still look online and see what the commission approved and then apply for that type in the next draw.
So if these people that were granted the license, the general license, if they were granted a waiver by the License Review Board, could they apply for those tags?
I don't know the answer to that question because the non-resident application period ended January.
Needing a whole new type?
But there's not an application period for it. It would be treated as a leftover license from the non-resident draw period because they're just becoming available, and so then they would be in the draw, the next draw, because they weren't identified or available in January when non-residents applied.
Only residents can get them.
Yes. Well,
So who's gonna get them?
unless
Is it type 2 for next year, or is it for this coming
no,
season?
it'd be for this year. Mr. President, Commissioner Dubie, if the license was undersubscribed, then there will be an opportunity for non-residents.
That's right. Everybody gets an opportunity in the first October.
If they're left over. And if it's not a very desirable license, typically those types of licenses are left over so that they come into the second leftover draw. So residents have hunting's pretty good for them, and some of them there may be enough residents interested in that they take all of them and there won't be any left. But a lot of the residents know that this area has extremely difficult access, and you basically have to have permission from one of the landowners prior to even applying. So
Excuse me. I'm sorry, I'm part of the problem here. The type 2 was gonna be any elk,
that's correct.
and 75 for them, 75 of those?
50 for the type 2, 75 on the type 1.
75 type 1, yeah, and the type 2, we're gonna have an
And what was the season date?
8/15 to 10/31 on the type 2, yeah, we should have,
Maybe Mr. Choma's doing that.
75K.
50 on the type 2.
Oh, good. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Mike?
Doug, how many permits were given in this area last year
75 type 1s
in total? How many?
in total.
Well, there's 175
There was
cows.
type 6s and type 7s as
Right,
well.
there was 2 type 1s, 2 type 6s, and the type 7
The
last year?
type 1 was just, excuse me, but it was just an extension of the season date. So it started off, so there wasn't an additional quota allocated. It was just the 75 to begin with.
Okay, so there was a total of how many permits? all
70,
told?
75,
75 permits last year?
175 type 6s, and then 50
20.
type 7s.
50 muzzleloader.
It's on the second page.
Yeah, I come up with 300 with the different, but I think I'm counting wrong here. I'm just trying to get an idea what's the ultimate goal here in 78?
So the managers, the 178, if you will, is like the bottom of a funnel. And so you got all these elk filtering in, and then they migrate across a lot of these private lands to go straight to the National Elk Refuge. And so over time, our managers have really tried to augment the reproduction, reducing the reproducing segment of the Jackson elk herd by providing additional harvest. The bull hunting is something that provides a lot of interest in the area, but the cow hunting is what really regulates things. The damage that the landowners see out there is kind of both. We see migrating elk causing problems and resident bulls that come into the hayfields, and they would like some relief from that. And so we've got management goals for the National Elk Refuge and within the herd unit, but this segment of the Jackson elk herd reproduces at such a high rate that the calf ratios are nearly double that what we see coming from the north or from the national forest lands, because there's very limited predation and habitat is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And so they produce lots of calves. And so we're trying to provide some relief to the landowners so they don't have so much damage. And we're also trying to regulate the harvest so we can get more reproducing elk taken out of that population, that segment of the population.
Does the department have a number of how many elk they would like to be taken from this unit?
Yeah, Mr. President and Commissioner Smid, we don't have sub-herd objectives, but overall the management objective for the elk herd, as Matt stated, was 11,000. But when you have real high reproduction coming from an area, it intuitively, that means that that population is doing way better than everything else. And our main concern is that as that population continues to grow, they'll take up more of a percentage of the elk on the National Elk Refuge, where we already have management goals that we're having a difficult time achieving. So if you have a goal, as Matt stated in his slide, it happens to be 5,000 elk, we're way beyond that. And the percentage of those elk that are coming from this subdivision over the last 30 years, we know from radio collar data, has gone from about 1 animal in every 10 to almost 4 animals in every 10 that are on the refuge that kind of move through this area and spend at least part of the year in area 78 and to the geographic areas just immediately north of 78. So there's a lot of interest on our part to maximize opportunity for the public to kind of help control that population.
Commissioner Crank.
Doug, I think it's the last meeting I attended anyway, which was some time ago. I think you gave a presentation on how to count elk from the air or other animals and with infrared. And it won't help the new commissioners, but the old commissioners, were those the videos you were showing us? Those were all in Area 78, I believe.
That is correct. That was the infrared surveys. We opted to try that just specifically because of this area and the dispute from some of the homeowners that there wasn't any elk there to be harvested. And the first year we did it, we counted a little over 800 animals. And then the next time we did it, we had, I think we had just around 700.
All basically in subdivisions and
in subdivisions and among areas that were really hard to get to. And from seasonal movement patterns, those elk go from the subdivisions back to the irrigated hayfields on Snake River Ranch, Serenity Ranch, and Lucas's. And then when the migration starts towards the refuge, then they again filter back through those larger ranches.
Explain why the feed is so good. And I mean, I guess you have irrigated ranch lands, but you also have lawns and gardens and stuff that regularly would be sagebrush that is now irrigated and has abundant feed for elk and moose and other animals.
Yeah, Commissioner Crank, that's true. There's basically you've got optimal habitat conditions because of the landscaping. They're planting all different kinds of shrubs, and it's cool, wet areas where the animals can do a lot of loafing. And then there's also the larger hayfields that are also irrigated and often they're fertilized as well.
With very little predation, I would guess.
And then, and of course, with the predation effects there's very limited predation that occurs in the subdivisions.
Mr. President,
Go ahead.
then you had these type 6s up there. Do you know how many cows they killed in that 78 last year?
So I know the total harvest was 168, and I can tell you. Approximately 100 of those were cows. We harvested.
What was the total number?
Pardon?
What was the total number?
160, and we harvested 56 bulls on that Type 1, and the Type 1 hunters had almost 90% success.
Any other questions for Doug?
I just have some information, maybe. A couple of the landowners, as you guys know, have emailed us. I've talked to a couple of them through email with the Snake River Ranch. They last year killed 25 cows and 3 bulls. They said this year, with these new changes, they would go to 32 cows and 16 bulls. I never got a response back from a fellow by the name of Lewis Leslie. He killed 12 bulls last year. And I asked him the same question, how many more elk would he let come off his place? No answer. So I'm wondering if all of this work is really going to do much.
Mr. President, Commissioner Smith, so a lot of times having a better pool of people available that they respect and know that can get on their lands will cause enough disturbance to those animals, and we'll keep them moving around. And number one, it'll reduce the damage potential, and number two, it'll add to the harvest. And so while the harvest may not jump up significantly there, the redistribution that could cause on those elk has a little more far-reaching result that could, impact the vulnerability of those animals in other areas.
Okay, so what you're hoping to do is move them out of 78 into other potential hunt
Either
areas.
out of 78 or onto parcels of 78 where they may not have been vulnerable before to harvest, but that hunters could take a little better, have better opportunity to kill more cows in particular.
I got one comment. As I said, I'm part of the problem here because I had commented about the general license, and I wasn't aware that some out-of-staters drew the. I was just thinking about type 1s and type 6s. I didn't know that. I should have known, but so you have some non-residents that drew an any elk tag, and now we're proposing to make it a cow tag, an antlerless tag. I don't know if you've addressed that with this review board, or if that's, I don't know what to do.
Mr. President,
Yes, Pat.
I might suggest to the commission, we look at what is appropriate to do with Area 78 and separate that issue about the non-residents. We may want to take action on that or not. But I think our first priority is what would be appropriate for doing with 78. I mean, how many elk should we kill? How should we structure the season? When should it start? All the information, and then we can separately decide if maybe the commission wants to provide some guidance to the license review panel about what maybe to do with those folks who relied on the general license and may have detrimentally relied on the information we published in January for the non-resident draw.
I think that's a good suggestion. So,
I'd make a motion.
go ahead.
I would say this is chapter 7.
Yes.
I would move that we approve chapter 7 as currently proposed today by the department. So the changes to 78 would be included, and other changes that Mr. Brennemeyer has noted in his presentation. So we would approve chapter 7 as currently written and submitted to this commission today.
Pat, one thing I neglected, we need to allow for public comment
Oh, I'm sorry.
before we do that. So if we could
Absolutely.
table that motion temporarily. I'll go ahead and take public comment at this time. The first one I've got is Carlton.
And then I think we take care of those non-resident too.
Mr. President, members of the commission, Director Talbot, Carlton Lower again. I'll be brief. This is a very social political area, and the answers are going to be hard to come by on this situation that we have. My one comment stems from the numbers that were thrown out, and a comment made about the 5,000 number on the National Elk Refuge that I just wanted to address was how we're way over that 5,000 objective, and I think one of the reasons is we have a large amount of elk coming out of the Grovant due to predation that are not going to stay on those feed grounds during the winter. So that was what I wanted to point out regarding the elk. And as far as a fix for 78, that's definitely going to be another tough subject, and I think it's going to take a lot of sitting down and meeting of the minds. I commend the Jackson guys because it's a hot topic button, in and around Jackson with the non-consumptive group. So that's my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is John Bird. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much, Commission, Director Scott. First of all, I'd like to thank you guys for your volunteer work on Game and Fish, and I really appreciate it. A lot of people do. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Area 75 and Grand Teton National Park, if I could. The enabling legislation, a little bit of history, the enabling legislation for Grand Teton National Parks is they'll have an elk reduction program. And they'll do that in consensus with the Wyoming Game and Fish. What we've seen, I've been hunting this area for over 50 years. What we've seen is this area go down from approximately 80 to 85,000 acres to, at the end of the season, less than 6,000 acres. And that includes mainly the hay meadows, Blacktail Butte, and the additional 500 acres they added in the Snake or the Gros bottoms outside the refuge. What has happened is you're taking, this elk migration occurs late in the year, normally the last 2 weeks of the season. So they've taken all the rest of that away, the entire 79 area that used to be open when I was a kid, the entire season has gone away. They've reduced it down to 75, well, they have 79 in the early season. But at the end of October 31st, it becomes Area 75, Antelope Flats, the Snake River bottoms that used to be Blacktail Butte, and the hay meadows. And they've taken this and reduced it as such for this last 10 days of the season. You're cramming maybe up to 600 hunters on less than 6,000 acres. That's 1 hunter per 10 acres. The Park Service has been pushing the game and fish around for years instead of coming to a consensus. These rules are one point in fact. They came up with these 3 or 4 years ago without the Game and Fish's consensus. They just arbitrarily say, we're going to do this. Taking the Snake River bottoms out after the hunter-bear conflict. We're going to do this. They didn't give the Game and Fish the option. They did come to a consensus. And what we're doing right now, we've got a bunch of sportsmen. I'm writing a letter to Secretary Zinke about exactly what's going on up here. You see these rules they came up with. One of them require use of non-leaded ammunition. It surprised me to see that today, especially since Secretary Zinke last month said the requirement for lead-free ammunition was gone on all federal lands. So that really surprises me to see the Park Service still even has that in. But it goes a lot deeper than this. The Park Service, especially over the last 8 years, has gone to a very anti-hunting climate. As far as people come up there for the harvest. One rule that I didn't see on this that they instituted last year was no stopping on the highway for hunters or along the highway. Well, guess what? There's no roads in that park. And in order to drop hunters off and stuff, you need to stop. We had one instance last year of a hunter stop because the photographers were taking pictures, so he stopped behind them, and a park ranger took him into a parking area and threatened him to lose his license because he stopped, even though he was behind photographers that were stopping taking pictures. The harassment last year was tremendous. I have over 60 hunters' names right now that are ready to sign the letter to Secretary Zinke about Grand Teton National Park and what's going on with it. My recommendation, they took the Snake River bottoms away. They took almost 6,000 acres away and gave the hunters a little under 400, what they called the Gros side, which is always a pad off the refuge between the park and the Gros. They've, over the last 50 years, they've taken away bull licenses. Talk to the people in the park and they say, well, it's a reduction hunt. We're only going to do cows. And you take a look at those elk herds up there, and they're 40% bulls. There's no reason you can't hunt some bulls out of those park herds. But the Park Service has decided, without consensus with the Game and Fish, and negotiating with the Game and Fish, by the enabling legislation that created Grand Teton National Park. And it does say consensus in there. And what we're seeing is we aren't seeing consensus anymore. We're seeing the Park Service drive you guys into what they want. I think what the commission needs to do is write a letter to Secretary Zinke, and I've already been asked by some of his people to ask you guys to write that letter, asking that the Park Service go back and negotiate in good faith. As far as the harassment by park rangers, the Game and Fish, the game wardens up in the Jackson area have seen it. They know about it. The sportsmen know about it. But it's gotten to where it's not a hunt anymore. You go up there and you're harassed by the anti-hunters anyway and the photographers that hate hunting, but now you're being harassed by the park rangers. And that's just absolutely not right in it. So my question, what I'm asking you guys is please draft a letter to Secretary Zinke These policies here were done without your consensus. They just arbitrarily said, well, we're going to create the rules, and that's not the way their enabling legislation gives it. So write a letter to Secretary Zinke and ask him to change it the way it's supposed to be, with consensus with the Wyoming Game and Fish on all policies concerning this area.
Go ahead, Mark.
I appreciate your comments, but I think one correction, I think the way I read that deal with the non-lead ammunition, that was just on all the federal bird refuges, the way I read it. I don't know if it was on
It
all.
included all federal monuments and the parks. It was all federal lands.
Well, I thought it was just federal bird refuges, but I could be wrong. Mr. Talbot, do you know the?
Mr. President, members of the commission, my understanding of that is that directive was issued by the director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and only pertained to lands under their jurisdiction. National park lands are not under jurisdiction of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Guess I'll have to add that comment into my letter.
Any other questions for John?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lee Livingston.
President Culver, that wouldn't be, I don't have any comments on chapter 7. That's probably for agenda item 6.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
My mistake.
You've heard from me enough. I'm sure you're here for more.
Okay. So, we had a motion.
What's the motion?
You want to recap your motion?
It was
Pat?
to approve chapter 7 as altered and amended by the department for for their presentation today, which would include the changes to Elk Area 78.
I'll second that motion.
Seconded by Commissioner Rael. Any discussion?
Are we gonna have a review board then for these people that work, assuming they were gonna have a NES license?
I think Pat can address that.
Mr. President and my fellow commissioner, let's do that by separate motion. If someone wants to pursue that,
Okay.
that'd be great. But I think it's separate and distinct from approving chapter 7.
So, you've heard the motion. It's been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So now we're on 78.
Mr. President,
Mr. Crank.
I would move that the license review board review any proposal to alter or amend or I can't think quite the word, but I would move that the license review board review any licenses issued to someone who relied on our publication of being able to hunt in Area 78 with the general license that applies to the license review board, that the license review board review those applications, and if they find that that person did in fact detrimentally rely on our publication and applied for a general license that they believed would allow them to hunt bulls on these private lands in Area 78, that the license review board look at, I guess, taking that license back and allowing them to return to their previous position. I don't think we can do anything for those people this year, but we would, they could tender that license back to the Game and Fish, receive a refund of those monies and go back to their original position, including preference points. I just think when we make and no one did this with ill motive, it's just that the public sentiment at that time said we should do general licenses, so we relied on that and we put it out. These folks relied on our publication. that general licenses would allow them to do certain things. And I just think it's probably wrong to have folks who may have waited for years to hunt a bull on the Snake River Ranch and had permission and burns all their preference points to get a general license and now have to go hunt on Mr. Talbot's ranch in Albany County or something. So I just think the License Review Board should review those if people submit applications.
I will second that motion, that long motion.
Okay.
Very
So
precise.
we have a motion and a second. What I would like to do here is give the representatives of the License Review Board a little bit of time to discuss amongst themselves whether this is possible and what possible problems there might be. So let's just why don't we just take a 10-minute break, give you guys a chance to discuss this, and then we'll come back and vote on the motion after we've heard from you. Absolutely.
I agree. That's good.
Nesbitt.
Mr. President, members of the Commission, Director Talbot, we discussed this, and this will be a fairly simple process for the License Review Board to just analyze each one of these cases if they're submitted on a case-by-case basis and issue either a refund or if they desire a license reissuance in another area where there is still licenses remaining on the quota, we can do that as well. And we'll have the region contact those ranches that may have some hunters that have already put in for the drawn elk licenses, general elk licenses that may have a problem, and make sure they know what the process is and how to submit those.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Crank.
Would it be helpful if we set an end date on this? I mean, I don't,
Yeah, Mr. President, Commissioner Crank, there's one in reg now. We'll just use the same one that's already existing if that's the pleasure of the commission.
there's what?
There's an end date in regulation right now.
Okay.
What is it?
Gene, is it January? Yeah, they have to apply for their, did you hear Gene? They have to apply for their a review before their season opens.
Okay. So you've heard the motion and it's been seconded. Any further discussion? If not, I'll call for the question. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. That moves us on to moose.
Mice?
Yes, Mr. President, members of the commission, we'll advance into Chapter 8, moose, and same format. So we look at changes across the state by region. We see that Jackson region had a decrease of 10. Cody, no changes. Sheridan, a decrease of 15. Green River, a decrease of 15. Laramie, no change. Lander, a decrease of 5. Casper, it's not applicable. And Pinedale has a decrease of 30. And I'll go through the concerns and public comments in a moment. Statewide, that ended up in resulted in 45 less Type 1 licenses and 30 less Type 4 licenses across the state. In 2016, we had 352 moose harvested at 92% success. And again, that's a limited quota, so the season dates run pretty long and people have pretty high success. When you look at the 10-year harvest trend, it is downward. We do have a few places that are looking a little bit up, I guess, or a little bit, we're optimistic. When you get in and around the Jackson area, calf ratios the last 2 years now have been higher than I have seen in 20 years that I've been working on that moose herd. And now the warden, John Stevens, Kyle Ash, and then the biologist, Allie Quartermanch, have been counting moose, and the calf numbers seem to be rebounding. And so we're a little encouraged by that, and we'll just see how that plays out over the next few years. So looking at the common themes and concerns that were raised, and I'm sure that you guys are well aware from the comments that in the Cody region, there are concerns about the moose population in the Wood River area, both the densities and the removal of moose in some of the localized areas there. Following our public meetings, we did not recommend any changes after taking public input and reviewing the public comments. And looking at the emerging ongoing issues, Jackson, we're concerned about those low moose densities north of Jackson. Cody has concerns about the moose population in the Wood River, and the managers there have been keeping track of the moose observations they've been making. They've also invested in some trail cameras to try and do some census work, if you will, on popular areas where moose are moving through different habitats, to see if they can't get a little better idea on what's there for moose numbers. And I believe during their flights this year, they did count 30 moose. And the managers there believe that the population is adequate to sustain the 5 licenses in that particular area. In the Laramie region, the ongoing Snowy Range moose study continues. And we're hoping that those results provide us some key information on future management decisions. You may remember in July, I believe it was last year, the commission approved a trend objective, and I think it was 70 moose, and the managers counted 200 moose this year. So it was unusual winter conditions, and moose were extremely visible this year, and so they ended up counting quite a few moose, and things are pretty good there, and they're anticipating that they'll maintain that same season structure. The overall adult survival remains pretty good, and so they're hoping to stay status quo yet for this year, and you'll see that in the draft regulation. And I guess with that, I know there's some publics here that would like to voice their opinion on that Wood River, and the department would recommend that the commission move forward with our recommendation to approve Chapter 8 as proposed. And with that.
Thank you, Doug. I have one question for you. You mentioned that they flew the Wood River and they counted 30 moose. What's the sightability there? What does your model project for total moose population then?
Mr. President, members of the commission. So on some of these herds, the distribution and the densities of moose are low enough that we don't have a statistical model to fly over and pick out moose. We applied that in a few areas in western Wyoming, on the west side of the Tetons, and in the north end of Jackson. And generally, we predict that we're seeing about, on those types of terrains where there are willow bottoms and some cottonwoods, we might see between 60 and 80% on a really heavy snow year. But most generally, your observability is not that high, and that's if you do a complete survey of the area. And so the animals the guys observed over in Cody were more incidental, and so they would like to go back in now and use some cameras to try and see if they can't pick out some additional animals in that drainage or in that herd hunt areas.
Any other questions for Doug? We do have one blue sheet. Mary? Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. President Culver, Commissioners, Director Talbot, thank you. My name is Mary Rumsey. I lived on the Wood River for 20 years. I live about 2 miles from the Forest Service boundary, which I will be addressing. We used to see lots of moose over the 20 years. Now I've seen one this winter. It was a female, 3 or 4 years old. I hope she's bearing twins. She was very big in February. I am here today to represent our moose, and also to represent the numerous people over the past couple of years who have made comments to you asking the commission to suspend moose hunting on the Wood River, where our male populations remain so young and so few. Regarding the survey was not taken just on the Wood River. It was taken for all of Hunt Area 9, which is the Meeteetse area. So we don't have 30 moose. We probably have the 10 and maybe a few more if you take into the sightability correction factor. So I'm asking you today to please suspend moose hunting in Hunt Area 9, where Park County Road 4DT matches up to the Shoshone National Forest boundary. Or if it's more convenient to the game and fish officials, to suspend it for the whole Wood River drainage while our boys are so young and so few. The Wood River moose represent 5% of the herd population, which is Hunt Area 9, Meeteetse, and Hunt Area 11, Cody. And yet we have sustained in the past 17 years that Bart Kroger, our biologist, has been keeping records, over 20% of the burden of that harvest. In our Hunt Area 9, we have roughly 20% of the population, and we have sustained 40% of the harvest burden over those 17 years. And it could even be higher. That's as long as they've been keeping records. The reason for this is the road runs directly parallel to the river in the Shoshone National Forest for 12 miles. It's pretty easy to go hunting. You see the moose down in the river bottom munching on some willows. The moose are in the rut while most of our hunting season is going on. So they're just kind of easy prey. The other thing that has complicated this further is the Forest Service has been undertaking logging projects for the past couple of years. The last project was supposed to be completed March 31st, and then they would have undertaken and plowed in the skid rows and things like that and increased the visibility and accessibility to the moose. Unfortunately, this project has now been extended till the end of December. So what we hoped would be plowed in and taken care of, and in the long term, good for the moose, the logging projects, is now going to continue to allow access and accessibility to our moose. The Cody office supplied Doug Brimmeyer in his moose presentation that I thought was excellent, indicating the Absaroka herd had 200 moose and that the population was stable. There has not been a survey, aerial survey done for the whole herd in 13 years. Last year I offered Tim Woolley and Bart Kroger to pay for any reasonable related moose expenses, be that research, be that surveys, be that signs, be that cameras, what have you, as it relates to our moose. I would like to see the survey done so we know what we're doing. We've had closed areas in the thoroughfare. Maybe there's more moose to hunt there than there are in the Wood River. The survey will be funded. The survey that you have in your packet that said that there was a recent survey was Hunt Area 9, as I mentioned, and Bart Kroger has been very diligent in the past 2 years about doing surveys, and I would like to commend him for that. The other thing is the office claims that their median age, the office is meeting their median age objective. But one of the reasons for that is that the collection of tooth samples, which determines a moose age, has been very spotty. In Hunt Area 11 in 2013, there was not a single tooth sample collected. So there's the last 2 years, the median age of the moose harvested in our herd area was 3.5 years. The prior year was 4.5 years, so we're butting right up against that objective. And the prior 3 years are skewed because they didn't have a very significant data set. Also, the average age, which is a secondary factor that you look at, in 2015, the age was 3.5 years of harvest and 4.1 years in 2016. Hunter satisfaction remains relatively high. That's another criteria that you look at. This is partially due to hunting is easy on the Wood River, so that usually gives a 40% bump, and also the males are in the rut, so they're not eating. And the third observation is observation of moose. Based on landowners and people in the area, they're not seeing the moose. Even the largest outfitter on the Wood River would not take moose hunters who draw a tag moose hunting on the Wood River. If our group of landowners and concerned citizens are wrong and you take this recommendation, it only strengthens the herd. If Game and Fish happens to be incorrect, the consequences could be irreversible or very expensive. I'd like to thank you for your consideration. We want to have moose around to see and hunt for future generations. Please suspend moose hunting in Hunt Area 9, where County Road 4DT meets the Shoshone National Forest. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mary?
Comment, Mr. President. I appreciate your passion very much so. But again, I have to go back to the boots on the ground that don't just focus on the Wood River, but the generalized area. And so, but I do appreciate your passion. And this department will ensure that the moose do not go away. I know that for a fact.
But we're running out of breeding stock. I have a lot of neighbors who are ranchers. We have a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 3-year-old.
We took you one from Cody. So
yes, that was a female, and the commissioner was involved in that process. I would like to thank Bart Kroger, Tim Woolley, and the commissioner for
Alan,
the
regional supervisor.
Yes.
But no, I mean that that's just a genuine action on the department's behalf to ensure that the population will remain strong.
The Wood River also suffered 5 very tragic events related to our moose last year. There was a elk hunter from Minnesota, Kevin Lovig. He killed our mother moose and our baby when he was out elk hunting, basically poached them. There was another moose that went through a trout pond and drowned. There was a fourth moose that got caught in, we have a high buffalo fence, 4 rails. Jim Olson, our game warden, says it's one of the hardest things for wildlife to deal with. The young guy got confused, got run over, and then had to be euthanized by one of your people. And the other one was just found dead, and the circumstances were undetermined. So after seeing 17 years of suffering and excess burden, I'm asking for a few years until the cameras, which will not be in position since July, we find out what we're dealing with. So suspend hunting in our area for a few years and let's see where we're at. I don't want to run out the clock.
Let's see, 17 years, didn't they bring the wolf back in 1996?
I believe it was
So that's
95. I believe it was 95. Oh, I agree. Climate issues are so hard on moose for bringing in parasites, for bringing in ticks, Eliospora. We have the wolves that I saw a hunting video where it says when the moose were introduced, the populations are now down, or when the wolves were introduced, the populations are now down 90%. Plus, we have a lot of grizzly bears. There were 3 grizzly bears directly across the river from where I live that were put down. Got a lot going on up there.
Again, I appreciate your passion very, very much, and I think the whole commission does. Very, very much.
So I want to do some, I want the moose conserved. I want to do some fun projects like aerial surveys, doing some research and the like, and being positive for our moose.
We have another question.
Oh, yes.
Go ahead, Caitlin.
How big of an area are you talking that you want no hunting? If it wasn't all of
It's 12
9.
miles. It's where the county road meets the Shoshone National Forest. And that would you can still hunt on the Wood River. There's still something called Dick Creek, which is about 10 miles downriver. There's a Sunshine Habitat Management area that Game and Fish supervises. That's accessible. There's still private lands that are accessible. They just need a break from the road hunting.
Which road is she talking about?
And the fact that the logging company has everything busted up right now.
Mark?
Thank you.
We took a ride up there, I think, when we did the ferrets. So what county, is that the county road you're talking? I don't know that area.
No, that would be on the Pitchfork Ranch. Actually, the Gray Bull, in talking to Bart and Tim Woolley, they steered some of the hunters to where they're going to have better luck. They're going to get the bigger bulls, and they steered them to the Gray Bull River. And that area, they're not the landowners don't have as many concerns as the landowners and the citizens in our area do about the moose. So the Gray Bull was able to absorb, for 1 year, we only had 1 moose taken off the Wood River as opposed to the typical 40%. And that's because of Tim and Bart steering them to the Gray Bull, where you're going to have a better success if your idea is to get a trophy moose.
So what boundary?
Brian.
There's still hunting in the Shoshone National Forest. Venus Creek and Jack Creek, there's still hunting, and that's beyond where you were with the ferret reintroduction.
There's the Grable River. The road's not on here, but it runs.
So one side would be this county road,
So
and
it
what's
would
the
be
other
like
side
the
that you?
north-
Shoshone National Forest.
Yeah, she's talking
Just
about
at that point, you would not be able to drive up the Shoshone National Forest road up to Kerwin to hunt moose for the next couple of years until we figure out what's going on, because they're just not there anymore. If it was easier for the managers to do the whole Wood River drainage, that would be a more extensive piece of territory. Stopping it where the county road meets the Shoshone National Forest, I thought was very manageable and would greatly help our populations.
Other questions for Mary?
I maybe just have a comment, but Is it because they've been killed out? Or have some of them moved out because of the logging and the extra traffic in there?
Well, they've been down, the logging started 3 years ago, and they've been down prior to that. But yes, it influences they don't really migrate, but they move around, so that would influence it.
You had 5 die last year from other
Accident,
causes.
yeah, 2 to poaching and 3 due to accident. And that's just what I know. In fact, there was a friend of mine who works for the Forest Service called me yesterday morning about some unrelated project. And he said the Forest Service found 4 moose that were killed by wolves on Carter Mountain. Now, half of Carter Mountain is in Hunt Area 9, the other half is in Hunt Area 11. We also had one in Owl Creek that Bart had to dig out of a pond that drowned. That's still in our hunt area, but it's closer to Thermopolis.
Thank you, Mary, for coming today.
Thank you.
Alan, can I put you on the spot? Could you come to the podium, please?
Yeah.
Can I ask you, I have one question for you, and then anything you'd like to add. Did you do an aerial survey on the Wood River?
Yes, Commissioner, or President Culver, Director Talbot, Commissioners, we did do a survey. We did 2 surveys. One in January, one in February of this year. And like Doug mentioned, they were in conjunction with doing bighorn sheep and elk surveys. So they spent about an hour on the one time in January, and I think a couple hours the other time, hitting all the drainages in Area 9, not just the Wood River.
And the results on the Wood River?
The results on the Wood River, out of those 2 flights, we had a high of 10 moose that were documented in there. And it was 3 bulls, 3 bulls, 3 calves, I think, and 3 cows.
Thank you.
4 cows.
Questions for Alan? Anything else, Alan, that you can add?
Yeah, if I could, if indulge me to give you a little background on that herd. The department is supportive of our recommendation, of the region is, and based on getting an accurate count in this herd unit is tough, just because of the terrain, the vastness of it. So what we base our management on is a moose limited opportunity objective. And I think you heard Mary allude to a 5-year running median age of 4.5 years for the male harvest. 5-year running average of hunter effort of less than or equal to 12 days per moose harvested. And a 5-year running average of 40% of the male harvest greater than or equal to 5 years of age. So currently in 216, where we're at is 5 years is a male average. So we're exceeding the 4.5. 8.5 days per moose harvested. So we're less than the 12 days. And 49% is greater or equal to 5 years of age, which is greater than 40%. So we're meeting our objectives for the herd unit and for Hunt Area 9. Here's some background on Hunt Area 9. Since 2003, we've had 5 tags in there. The average hunter success since 2003 has been 91%. The current 5-year running days harvest for Area 9 is 5.9, so less than the herd unit. We've done 9 aerial surveys since 2000, and those were not a complete survey, but we have done surveys in there. 2001 and 2002, we had 41 moose. Between 2005 and 2010, that number dropped to an average of 16 per survey. But then starting again in 2015 and 16, the average jumped to 32 moose per survey. During the 2015 and 2016 surveys, the most recent ones, 12 calves were observed during these flights. And this is a pretty small sample size, but gives you an indication. And so the calf-cow ratio is about 35:100, which is pretty good for moose, and then 50 bulls per 100. So the region has taken the stand that, you know, we are harvesting bulls, so we're not hitting the reproductive segment. We agree with Mary, and I have to mention too that I appreciate her passion. We can probably do more to get more information in there on the Wood River, which we're going to do. Some of the things that Bart and Mary and Tim have worked on are the trail cameras, putting up some signs so that we don't have this incidental harvest, hopefully. And I think in the future, we're going to really try to get those 2 samples in. We're not talking a large amount, 5 per hunt area, so 10. Some years, like last year, we had 11 samples turned in 2016. Mary's right, in 2013, we only had 3, but other years, we've averaged between 6 and 7. So we've got some samples there, but I think we can probably do a better job on following up and getting more of those tooth samples in, which helps, obviously, in our management. So.
Mike?
Would it be unreasonable, you said that some of your surveys, you could probably do a better job to get some better information. Would it be unreasonable? I mean, you've carried a 5 quota limit. Would it be unreasonable to ask for a slight reduction in the moose licenses until the department can gather better information?
Well, the problem is, like, the reason we're under this scenario is that it's extremely hard to get really comprehensive samples when you're flying moose surveys. You know, for an elk or deer, when you can catch them down in the winter range, you know, and they're high sightability at that time, moose are in the timber a lot of times when we're flying these times. Obviously, if they're in the willows, a little easier to see, but it's really hard to get a good comprehensive count on these things. We've tried. One thing to bear in mind is that since 2003, we've been running these 5 licenses, and you know, some of these drainages, you'll see hills and valleys of what the populations do. These moose move around a little bit. Wood River moose did take a hit last year with, you know, some additional non-hunting related mortalities. But, you know, we feel that, you know, the population can stand 5 bulls being harvested in it. If we didn't think so, we wouldn't do it.
Mr. President?
Yes, Pat.
Alan, is there, you know, Mary says that there's an inordinate amount of moose killed in Area 9 on the Wood River because of this long stretch through the forest along the river. Has your studies borne that out? I mean, are there, if we give 5 moose licenses in Area 9, are 3 of them killed on the Wood River and 2 on the Grable River or something like that?
Our average on the Wood River is 1 to 2 per year. So, and it depends on the year, obviously, but that's been our experience since about, Bart doesn't give me any time, but 1 to 2 a year.
So if it's 2/5 would be 40%, if my math is accurate. 40% of the moose kill in that entire area occurs on the Wood River.
Since 2005, 13 bulls have been harvested on the Wood River.
And you've had 5 per year?
Mm-hmm. So that equals about that, yeah, 38%.
Mr. President, if I may?
Yes.
Let me shed some light, or maybe Alan, you can, on the moose that was transplanted relocated to Mary's. I happened to be at the right place at the right time, and Alan invited me to accompany the crew that did that. So, if you would, please.
Yeah, we've kind of initiated a rogue moose rehabilitation program where we take them down to the Wood River to kind of supplement that population. When we had one in Cody, and so before it got into trouble, and that's the one that Commissioner helped out with, we were able to mobilize it, and we took it and released it on the Wood River. We had another one up on the South Fork, same type of deal. It was starting to get aggressive towards the people in the community up there. So we tranquilized that, and we took it down to the Wood River. And that is our intention too. If we have any more of these scenarios, like we had one just the summer before in Byron that we caught, we didn't take it to the Wood River, but there is that option. We're trying to do everything we can. So there is 2 moose that we released in there.
Mr. President, the reason I bring this up is for the record, because I want the record to show that the department's passion too is to help Miss Mary out as best we can at times when we can. So we might talk about the ones that were killed, but not about the ones that were relocated. So please keep that in mind.
Thank you, David.
I guess that
Mike.
just kind of raises a question in my mind, why, when you relocate a moose, you would choose the Wood River.
Because of all the dialogue we've had with Mrs. Rumsey. And we understand her concerns and her passion. We just thought that was appropriate action or a good place for them. There obviously is other places we could have put them, but these
But
two,
it had nothing to do with the population. You're concerned about the population of Wood River?
no, like I said, we're, as managers, we feel we can sustain the harvest of 5 bulls in Hunt Area 9.
It's a good effort on our part, I think.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can you pardon my ignorance, but why are 7, 8, 14, and 15 closed?
8 is the thoroughfare.
Okay.
So, yeah, backing up, 8, 9, and 11 are part of the this herd unit. And 8 has been closed since a little after the Yellowstone fires went through. There was a lot of habitat removal in that backcountry portion of it, so that's why we've closed that.
And have you done surveys in there to see if there's what the populations are now?
Just incidental when we're flying moose or a bighorn sheep mostly and elk. The guys will look for moose, but we haven't done a concerted moose survey in there to my knowledge since I've been there.
Doug, you have something you wanted to add?
Mr. President, and Commissioner Doobie, the other areas over by Jackson's 7 and 32 and 15 were closed because we went through about 6 to 8 years with calf ratios that were basically between no calves observed on winter ranges to about 15 to 16 calves per 100 cows. There was a time period there, and the high level of predation that was in that area, we didn't think that any harvest could be sustained in there, and so we moved to the point where we just moved away from harvesting there. And so hopefully as populations change and we get wolf management and some other large carnivore management under our belt, we can start looking back towards having some recruitment and some hunting seasons opportunities there.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. President?
Mr. Crank?
I would commend the department. I think they've moved to look at limiting cow moose harvest in areas predated by grizzly bears and wolves this year. I think that's a significant change, and I commend the department for those changes. I think that's a good move. We need to conserve as many moose as we can, particularly in those areas where they're being heavily predated by grizzly bears and wolves, which we know. I don't think it's just a coincidence that with the advent of the reintroduction of the wolves and a grizzly bear population that's far beyond objectives and far beyond what anyone ever envisioned, that our moose herd is getting destroyed. So I commend the department for those moves they've made in the past year.
So noted. Well,
I guess maybe I have one question too.
Yeah.
If they're seeing 30 moose, would it be a normal percentage to take 5? I mean, that 5 out of 30 maybe seems to me a high percentage, but maybe not.
Mr. President, members of the commission, and Commissioner Byrd, the managers basically are managing on a population level, and so when you're counting those moose, it's just a portion of that area, and so that's why the region had adopted those alternative objectives that Alan referred to, the limited opportunity objectives. So they monitor the population based on the amount of time a hunter spends to be successful, and then the average age. We have some criteria for managing moose that calls for if you can count them all, then you can look for bull ratios. But when you're managing a population and you're not doing anything to the reproducing segment, as long as you have bulls in the population, we believe that there's some opportunity there for the public to participate in some hunts.
Thank you.
I would entertain a motion.
President Culver, I motion that we accept Chapter 8 as is presented by Doug and the department, please.
Is there a second?
Come on, I don't want to be 2 for 2.
We're just picking on you today.
I would second Mr. Rail's motion.
My man.
I don't want to see him be depressed tonight.
Is any additional discussion? Then I'll call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I need a show of hands. All those in favor?
Aye.
1, 2, opposed? Okay, motion fails.
At least we took it to the line this time, didn't we?
All right.
Can I ask why?
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleading my ignorance on the moose. I don't know a lot about the moose, but it seems by looking at the information that you provided us, our moose numbers are going like that. And from personal experience in my areas, our moose numbers are declining. And we just spent all morning talking about a deer population that we think is the best population in the world, and we want to side on being as more conservative than liberal, yet we have moose numbers that are going down, and we're keeping a lot of them the same. Although I look at a lot of these, and there's a lot of other areas that are being closed too. And it seems to me that, I may be naive on this, but it seems to me her proposal can't hurt anything. Is it going to help? I don't know. It might not, but I can't see it's going to hurt anything. And to me, it's almost like, you know, we're okay with having antler restrictions for 2 or 3 years and take them off because we want to do that. So to me, this situation is rather similar in that, what would it hurt for 1 year to see how it responds? I mean, we're not talking thousands of critters here. We're only talking very few. You can count them on one hand. Anyways, that's my 2 cents.
Any other discussion?
Why do we have these studies done? Why do you go out in the field and do it if we can't accept your recommendations? That's my point.
But they're saying it's hard with moose, too, to
Well,
get a
there's
decent
obviously,
count.
it's hard, it's difficult for elk too and deer. I mean, there's still a plus or minus that we're looking at too, Doug, that you don't see. Is that true? What's the factor? What do you think?
Mr. President, Commissioner Rail, it's, as Alan suggested, you know, it's the broad geographic area these animals are distributed across, and then their seasonal movement patterns. A lot of times they're not very visible to survey techniques. And so, you know, when Alan's guys are out there, they're only seeing a fraction of what the general occupied habitat could hold. And so they're basically managing that population on overall. The population goal is to provide some opportunity but maintain the population on the landscape. And those managers felt that recommendation was the best way forward, was still provide some opportunity to the hunting public. And if it's on the bull segment, it was not going to be an impact on that population, and that's where the managers stand. We're standing behind those recommendations.
So you close the other areas based on good management, and if you were to come to us and say and recommend we close this area, I'd be all for it. But you're not recommending that, so I guess that's my take on that is we ask you to do a job, you do it, and then we turn our back on you. And I don't think that's right on the department. So, or the commission to do that to the department. So that's my take.
Mr. President?
Pat?
So it looks, well, so the motion was to accept the I guess the grief the commission's having is with the Wood River section. Am I reading that correctly from the vote?
Yes.
So I guess the majority of this commission has said they're not willing to approve the moose regulations as proposed. So Mary has suggested you either close all of Area 9.
No.
Or,
Nancy?
yeah,
Okay, I,
or you close it where the road meets the boundary, so.
no, the whole of the Wood River drainage, which would still keep the Graybull open and other areas in the Wood River.
Excuse me,
Or
okay.
I think what would be easier to manage at this point in time is to close where the area where Park County Road 4DT meets the Wood River Road boundary at the Shoshone National Forest. It would be about 12 miles along the river that would be closed.
So this is probably a question for Alan. Which, if the commission were to adopt one of those two, the Wood River drainage or where County Road 4DT or whatever it is meets the boundary, which, if you had to have one of those two, which would you rather have?
President Culver, Commissioner Crank. Well, obviously, the smaller the area, because, I stand behind what our people's recommendation is, and that we feel that, we're trying to provide opportunity. So the smaller the area.
Which one's smaller?
From the forest boundary down to 12 miles. But I'd have to really look at a map. Most of that's just one strip of riparian. That's where they're going to be. But I have to look and make sure that we can get some boundaries. On the one side, there's a road that's going to be very easy. On the other side would be more difficult. So that, it's simple for the hunters to understand.
Well, and I see the problem. So you can't kill a moose between the road and the Wood River, but how far does it go on the other side of the Wood River? Is that what you're describing?
Yes. Yeah. Right. That's where it'd be problematic. And if you close off the whole Wood River drainage, you're closing off a big chunk of ground, which we don't feel is necessary.
Okay, and I understand that. I mean, I'm not advocating this position. I'm just trying to see
Sure.
if this commission votes a certain way, what would be manageable for you. I want to make sure that whatever we vote for is manageable for the department.
Right. I appreciate that.
I want to make a comment here. Mary, I hope you understand this, but I am very reluctant to see this commission start taking a scalpel and carving chunks out of hunt areas. That sets, in my opinion, a very dangerous precedent. I could see where we're going to have subdivisions that don't want elk hunting in their backyard, wanting it carved out. I mean, I hate to see that. These hunt area boundaries have been established for years, and they've been established using sound biological reasons. And for us to go in and start carving that up really does concern me.
It also concerns, President Culver, it also concerns me that the Wood River has sustained 40% of the harvest burden with only having 20% of the hunt area population for almost 20 years, almost as long as I've been there. And on the herd basis, we have less than 5% of the population, and we take over 20% of the harvest hit. Moose not only are good for hunting for the economy of Meeteetse. Meeteetse is a town of 336 people. The big draw in Meeteetse in the summer is to drive to Kerwin, which is an old abandoned mining facility, and see a moose. And I want the moose to be around in the future, not only to see, but to hunt. And I appreciate Commissioner Dubey's comments. What will it hurt? The cameras aren't going out. I hope I am wrong. I want to be wrong on this. I want our boys to be safe. But right now we have a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 3-year-old, and technically all 5 moose that are harvested from Hunt Area 9 could come from the Wood River. Heaven forbid these yearlings grow a fork or a spike. We could take those down and have them for hors d'oeuvres or something. As Jim Olson said, and he's a great game warden, our game warden, he said most people don't go moose hunting for freezer meat. Well, that's what you'd be getting on the Wood River. And we just need to get our boys stronger and older. We've taken out a lot of the good breeding stock because this has gone on for 20 years of just being able to hunt them. So I think this situation, I don't think every subdivision or owner is going to be able to say, oh, we can do this. I have landowners, I have numerous people that are saying, let's suspend this for a while and hopefully get it right. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Mr. President, I believe if we suspend that now, it's going to be indefinitely. It's not going to be on a 2 or 3 year basis, Mary. That's just the way things operate, it seems like, in this wildlife industry. And I just don't think, I think we're cutting her throat. I just don't believe that. I think that moose are in better condition than what you portray. So, and I could be wrong, and I hope I am. Or I hope you're wrong.
Commissioner Anselmi?
Alan or Doug, how many like you got 5 licenses, and what are the non-residents? What's their quota on these 5? How does it work?
It's 1.
There's 1.
For every 5, it's 80%, 80-20.
And real quickly, I want to go back to Doug and Alan's work, and I'm talking Doug McWhirter back there. If they recommended for us to shut it down, that would be very simple and very easy, but they don't. So quite simply, I just don't understand again, I appreciate your passion, but I think if we shut it down, it's going to be indefinitely, so.
This is a tough one.
Mr. President?
Yes, Galen.
Instead of redoing boundaries and stuff, why don't we cut the quota? Wouldn't that be simpler?
Mr.
Maybe
President, members of the
allow
commission.
2 maybe versus
If you will
5.
notice, those quotas are issued in numbers of 5 because the statute requires us to issue 1 license to residents and 1 license to non-residents, in other words. So that's the reason we have the 5 quota here. You'll notice in sheep it goes in increments of 4, and moose it goes in increments of 5.
So if we were,
That statute, that's on one of our.
That's correct.
if we were to reduce that to 3 or whatever, we would have the same situation we just had with the elk in Area 78, where our licensing board would have to find.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's a little more complicated than that. If we did that, we would thus be in violation of state statute. We wouldn't be able to issue those licenses according to statute. What you did in Hunter Area 78 is you potentially have individuals who applied for a season that doesn't exist anymore. In this case, you have a statute that directs you in the way that you issue licenses, and those 2 are very, very different issues.
Okay. Doug?
Mr. President, members of the commission, Director Talbot. So we across the state, we did address some of those issues with some areas that did want to go to a smaller number, but then there has to be another hunt area that is capable of taking on that non-resident split. So if we drop this one down to a fraction of that 5, some other hunt area in the state that has to be ready to take that on, and whether or not those regions have approached their publics with that increase, because moose are kind of a sensitive issue and highly sought after. In this area alone, so far, we've got 155 applications for this particular hunt area. So according to Gene, just handed me a note on that. So, thank you.
Doug, real quickly, when was the last, what was the last area to be shut down, and when was it shut down? Any idea?
I believe in 2011, we closed some of the areas around Jackson, and again, it was primarily because there was just absolutely no calves, and during a 3-winter period, the Park Service had been monitoring 3 different packs of wolves in the Moran area, and over a 3-month period for 3 different winters, those wolves killed 55 moose on that winter range around Moran Junction, and we felt that it was at the point with no calves, and the population was declining rapidly enough, and we were documenting that level of predation. We needed to do something, and that's when we went to the public to close it.
And that's probably not going to reopen for at least the next 4 or 5 years.
You know, I keep talking to the field managers there that keep watching those calf ratios, and like I said, this is the 2nd year now that we've had some really, really good calf ratios and things are kind of looking up. But it takes a while for those calves to become adults and actually contribute to the population. So overall, the trend's still
5
way
years?
down.
4 or 5 years maybe?
I hope.
Still keep progressing?
Yeah, I hope it keeps progressing.
So, I would remind the commission, we are way, way behind schedule. We're gonna have to make a decision on this. So,
Starting to have fun.
yeah,
One other question.
go ahead, Mike.
Doug, I know with our elk licenses, we have all types of licenses, 1 through 9. And some of those licenses in certain areas are valid only in certain portions of that area. Is that something that could be done? Keep the licenses at 5, but maybe,
Mr. President and Commissioner Smith, there's always options within those limitation sections to identify some geographic areas. And again, when you're dealing with such a low number of permits, the field managers again felt that there was opportunity to provide the public some recreational opportunity for hunting in that area, in the entire area. But we can certainly, it's done in other areas with limitations.
Mr. President?
Yes, Pat.
So Gene and Doug, I mean, we have 155 people, which I would guess would include both residents and non-residents.
That's correct.
Have applied for licenses in this area. Based on our initial publication, we were going to issue 5 bull licenses in this area. So I think whatever the commission decides to do, we need to take care of those folks. I mean, they've relied that there was going to be a hunt in this area and they've applied. I mean,
Mr. Chairman?
I don't think it'd be fair to now say there's no season in that area and you blew your chance for a moose license if you had max preference points, for instance, in this area. So if we do anything, I think we need to maybe address the Wood River segment and not totally do away with the season. I mean, I don't know how you do that, but.
Okay. He,
Just quick, so is that why Area 35 is only 3 tags? And Area 40 is now having 3 licenses because you had to
Mr. President.
you
and
take them here, you gotta give to there?
Commissioner Dubey, yeah, the region over there decided to approach that with manipulating those numbers within their region, and they could accommodate that split, the non-resident resident split within the adjacent hunt areas, and so they were prepared to do that, and that's what they proposed.
Yeah, because I see 2 areas that only offer 3 licenses
36.
per area.
President Culver, may I make a comment on that?
quickly, yes.
Yes, I have been asking for the past year if we could do with moose what they did with sheep, drop the quota from, so that we got the non-resident going somewhere else. Imagine my surprise on the 18th, 2 days before the season setting meeting, to be told, to find out online, to see that this has gone to 3 and find out this was an option for moose for all this time. We could have swapped out areas that are being hit too hard, and I'm not asking to close the whole hunt area. I'm just asking to help out the Wood River for a few years. Imagine my surprise, we could have taken some of our moose quota and given them to another area that wants the moose quota. This is something I've been asking about for a year, and I was told it wasn't available, and it apparently is. So.
Mary, you did get up there and ask to have the area shut down completely. You did.
No, the Wood River drainage, that still leaves open the great. If I did, I misspoke. I said the Wood River drainage, or what I would like and what I think is most manageable.
Wood River drainage, it could have.
Yes, but not all of Hunt Area 9. There's still moose, as I said, on the Gray Bull, and that's where our game and fish people are graciously steering people, is for hunting on the Gray Bull.
Any other discussion? I think our department employees are working right now trying to come up with an equitable solution for this. But is there any other discussion while they're trying to hammer something out?
the only thing I was thinking is.
Go ahead and talk into them.
Okay. If we leave the quota at 5, can we just make one of those permits available for the Wood River drainage? And I don't know what kind of headaches that causes the department as far as licensing and boundaries and that sort of thing, and how that'd be issued.
seems to me we would have to create a new hunt area. And I'm not sure how that would work with the draw.
Is the question?
Mr. President, members of the commission, I think that Wildlife Division will have a proposal for your entertainment.
Mr. President, members of Commission, Director Talbot, the department recommends that the commission entertain a motion to allow the 5 licenses in Area 9, and we could add a limitation that those licenses are not valid off National Forest in the Wood River drainage.
Yes, that would be acceptable. Thank you very much.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Doobie and seconded by Commissioner Byrd. Everybody understand the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you so much. All our people, thank you, and our moose, thank you. And hopefully we can get rid of this in a few years. And I'll be in favor of more moose and get rid of it. Thank you so much.
Okay, Chapter 9, Bighorn Sheep, and this chapter is split in 2, so there's mountain goats and bighorn sheep. And I will go through at your pleasure if you want to stop at bighorn sheep for questions, or I can get through the entire Chapter 9. So changes to the limited quota licenses for this year. Jackson Region, no change. Cody has plus 10. Laramie, minus 2. Pinedale, there's no change. Casper, no change. And Lander, there's no change to the license allocations. The statewide changes in the total mean the overall change has been an increase of 8 licenses, and in 2016 we had 167 bighorn sheep harvested, and that was 80% success. At our public meetings, there was no major issues raised, and because of that, there wasn't really anything identifiable in terms of the hunt area concerns. The 10-year sheep harvest bumped up a little bit last year, and we're just under 170 for harvest there. And if it's okay, Mr. President, I'll move right into mountain goats. We did not have any issues from the public comment periods on bighorn sheep. That'd be okay to move on?
That'd be fine, and then we'll just handle them as separate motions afterwards.
Okay, and in Chapter 9 for the mountain goat section, in the Jackson, you may remember last year we bumped that quota up to 12, I believe, and this year we're looking to drop that back down a little bit. The Cody area is proposing an increase of 4 licenses. Last year, the total harvest was 37 animals, and we had 97% success on those tags. And so there weren't any major issues raised at any of the public meetings, and we didn't really receive any significant comments on this particular regulation. And the department recommends that the commission make a motion to support the Chapter 9 regulation as proposed.
Any questions for Doug on Chapter 8 or 9?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I make a motion we approve Chapter 9, the bighorn sheep and the mountain goat season.
Oh, they're both.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion was made by Commissioner Anselmi, seconded by Commissioner Smith. I apologize, I said Chapter 8 and 9, they're both Chapter 9, my mistake. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Next, we have Chapter 15, the recreational hunting season for wild bison. And if we look at over the last, since 2011, I believe we've harvested close to 1,400 animals in this population. We are starting to move that population towards its objective, and managers have started to adjust hunting season quotas accordingly. And so this last year we harvested a little over 200 cows and almost 70 bulls in that population. So what we're looking at for this year, the changes from 2016, we increased the Type 1 licenses from 50 to 70 in Area 2. And last year, if you remember, we were a little bit concerned about the bull ratio in the herd unit. And so managers proposed to cut back on the numbers of bull licenses just because it's once in a lifetime. And people that were drawing that license were starting to get into the younger animals, and we wanted to maintain a real high quality in this population. So last year they did back off. The numbers of bulls in the population, of course, shot way up. And so we're going to try and find that kind of a reasonable place to be within that population where we can still achieve objectives but have some harvest for a sought-after license. The Type 4 licenses, we've historically have had a real high number of licenses, relatively high for the population. Last year we had 245 licenses, and this year we're proposing to drop that down to 50 to basically go into a maintenance mode with that population and just take what we need to out of that population so it does not increase significantly during the next year. We'd like to maintain it at the objective of 500 bison. We will continue to have an opening date. The refuge has this system for people to get an access permit for the refuge, and we're proposing to maintain that availability of alternate permits, but the date would change so that it's changed from January 11th, it's what it closed this year, to January 2nd. Emerging and ongoing issues, there's basically none really identified during our public meetings, and we're kind of shifting management into a maintenance mode in this population to provide opportunity but stay at the population objective. And so, the department recommends that the commission approve Chapter 15, the wild bison recreational hunting season, as proposed by the department.
Questions for Doug? I should also open it to the floor. Does anybody have any comments they want to offer on Chapter 15? If not, I guess we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the Game and Fisheries recommendations for Chapter 15.
Second?
Second.
Mark Anselmi, Pete made the motion, and Mark seconded. Okay, Doug. Oh, should vote, shouldn't we? Excuse me. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Couple more to go. Looking at Chapter 11, upland game bird, small game. This includes sage grouse, blue and rough grouse, partridge, sharp-tailed pheasants, and small game. Starting with the sage grouse, changes from 2016, Hunt Area 1, we adjusted the opening date to coincide with the third weekend in September, and we maintained that season length at 15 days. Hunt Area 4, we adjusted the opening date to coincide with the third weekend in September with a season length of 3 days. During the public meetings, there were basically no major issues raised at the public meetings. If it pleases the commission, I would just, I can either halt there or move forward through the rest of the upland game bird portions of area Chapter 11. The blue and rough grouse seasons, changes from 2016, there's really no substantive changes there, and there was no major issues raised at our public meetings regarding this portion of Chapter 11. Under the sharp-tailed grouse, chucker partridge, gray partridge, and small game, we presented that, and what we proposed for changes from 2016 is moving that opening date from October 1 to September 15th. There were really no major issues raised at public meetings, and there was no changes subsequent to public meetings. There wasn't really any significant comments provided regarding this portion of the Chapter 11 regulation. For the pheasants, changes from 2016, we changed the opening dates to coincide with the traditional Saturday openers in November. And there were no major issues raised at our public meetings regarding this portion of Chapter 11. And that concludes the Chapter 11 portion of all the different species that are within Chapter 11, and the department recommends the commission approve that recommendation as proposed.
President,
Mark.
I make a motion we approve Chapter 11 as presented.
I'll second it.
Commissioner Anselmi and Commissioner Smith. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Chapter 14, migratory game bird hunting seasons and the light goose conservation order. So, the changes we've made to this regulation from 2016, we made some editorial changes to shorten, consolidate, and clarify the combined regulation. We opted for a liberal hunting package in the Pacific Flyway, which is 107 days for ducks, the Central Flyway, 97 days for ducks, and 107 days for geese in both flyways. And they're again in place. That's the same, similar to last year. Some 2017 season dates were modified to open and close on weekends. The pintail bag restriction was reduced from 2 to 1, and the limited quota sandhill crane permits was increased by 80. And in the regulation, if you remember, we historically have had a shooting table or a hours table for sunrise, and we removed that table from the regulation because of most people are using their smartphones for sunrise figures for their current location. The table basically had all these fields in it to give the hunter a way to look up where they were at in the state. And this way, most of our folks wanted to have that removed, so that was changed. Some more changes. We opened the light goose season in the Pacific Flyway, and if you look at your public comments, there was some feedback regarding this. There is also the other changes from 2016 is there is a new federal schedule that should eliminate the need for an emergency rule for late migratory bird seasons. However, the final federal framework for that will not be published this year until after you guys meet and take action on this chapter. If that final framework is more restrictive from the federal government, an emergency rule may still be necessary. And brochure publication will delay the printing of that until that final framework is published. And it's the intent is for the Fish and Wildlife Service to publish this final framework a little bit earlier. This year is just one of those years where they're going to be a little bit later. So some of the common themes and concerns that were raised at our public meetings. In Jackson, there was some opposition to the proposed light goose seasons in the Pacific Flyway, and these concerns revolved around the potential for the accidental take of trumpeter swans. In Laramie, there was interest at the Torrington meeting to extend the duck season until the end of January. And with that, the department makes a recommendation that the commission entertain a motion to accept the Chapter 14 regulation as proposed by the department.
Doug, is there very much opportunity in the Pacific Flyway for light goose hunting?
Mr. President, and members of the commission, it really depends on where you're at within the flyway. And the northern portion of the flyway, there are some geese that do fly through there in October. Once you get down south into the Star Valley area and down towards Seaskiddy, we do have members of the public that in the past have sent us information of 150 sitting on a reservoir that they could not take pursuit of because the regulation closed it. And so that was one of the incentives for us to, again, reevaluate where we're at with it and provide that opportunity.
Thank you. Other questions for Doug? I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we accept Chapter 14 recommendations from the department.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Second. Mark Anselmi seconded. I should, after each one of these, I actually should allow for comment from the floor. So if I forget, please make sure you make yourself known. There's no comment? Okay, with all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Chapter 20, wild turkey for the 2017 fall and 2018 spring seasons. You'll see on your packet that we're providing a September 1 to September 30 general any wild turkey archery only season. And this is in response to some public comments that we received from bow hunters of Wyoming asking if we would entertain opportunity for people to participate in an archery hunt in the fall for turkeys. And managers across the state met and decided that that opportunity was warranted. And so we're proposing that that be included in the Chapter 20 seasons. The other changes, we adjusted the opening date to April 14th in Area 1. Area 2, 3, we did not have any changes. And then Area 4, the archery only is limited to a portion of that area east of the Bighorn River. But the spring season, they adjusted the opening date to April 14th. And then Area 5, there was no change proposed. And there were no major issues raised at public meetings. And as a result, there were no subsequent changes incorporated into our recommendation. And we recommend that the commission consider a motion to approve Chapter 20 as presented.
Mr. President? I
Yes.
have a question for you, Doug, on the turkeys, and it's just for my own information, but we have a fall turkey season that can be taken with any weapon, high-powered rifles included, and we have a wanton waste regulation as well. I've often wondered why high-powered rifles were okay to shoot a turkey in the fall, because I mean everyone I've ever seen turns them into about a 6-foot turkey. So it's more for my curiosity than anything.
I might refer to Chief Nesvik on that one. I can call a turkey in, but I don't know the answer to your question.
So, Mr. President, Commissioner Schmidt, I'll take a crack at that, and I think where it comes from is traditionally it was fairly common practice, especially in places like Wyoming where turkeys were hunted in more open settings, to take them with high power rifles like a 22-250, and a properly placed shot, just like with any animal, if it's placed in the right spot, it can be done in a manner that still preserves the edible portions. I mean, I think you know as well as I do, if you put the right bullet on even a 23 caliber rifle and you shoot an elk in the wrong spot, you're gonna waste meat. So I think that's probably where it at least started at.
Okay, thanks.
I might mention too that unlike spring turkey season where they go out specifically for turkey in the fall, it's more opportunistic. A lot of our hunters buy an elk license and then a subsequential turkey license just in case they come across some turkeys. And so we've made provisions for that. Am I correct?
You're correct.
Okay. Other questions or comments on Chapter 20? Does the public have anything? Okay. Take a motion.
With that, I would accept Chapter 20 as proposed. Make a motion to accept Chapter 20 as proposed.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I second.
You get that? Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity for today. I feel like I've had a few questions today, but if you have any more, I'd entertain trying to answer them.
Well, I think it's time to let you sit down, Doug. You've had a day. Thank you very much. Okay, so it's 4 o'clock. You folks want to take 10 minutes before we continue?
Sure.
Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. Doug Brimmeyer? Doug, could you come back to the podium? You thought you were done, but you're not. So,
Mr. President, members of the commission, and Director Talbot, you may remember at the beginning of my second presentation, we talked about the commission regulation chapter 2, and then that chapter 2 included portions of chapter 43, which we were recommending repealing. And when we finished just a few minutes ago, Commissioner Rail's wife, Jenny, pointed out to me that she couldn't remember if we reviewed that, repealed that, and I guess we didn't. And so the department makes a recommendation that the commission consider a motion to repeal chapter 43 because it is incorporated into chapter 2. We needed to take that additional step at the end of that process.
thank you, Doug. Jenny, thank you for catching that. Can I have a motion to repeal chapter 43?
So moved.
Commissioner Crank made the motion and Commissioner Byrd seconded it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. And next, Jennifer, or Jean.
President Culver, members of the Commission, Director Talbot, it's my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Doreen, our Licensed Section Manager, to all of you. She's spoken to all of you on the telephone most recently, and this season right now is her 4th year for conducting all the limited quota drawings for the regulations you just approved. And a very important part of conducting drawings and performing her job duties is to have regulations the Commission approves for the issuance of licenses, which is Chapter 44. And today, for this agenda topic, Jennifer will present to you and walk you through the proposed changes for Chapter 44 license issuance, and then ask at the very end for your approval to approve those changes and answer any questions you may have. And also, I know there's members of the public that also had signed up for this topic that may or may not still be here at the end of the presentation, President Culver. So with that, I'd like to have Jennifer present to you the regulation Chapter 44.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, President Culver, members of the Commission, Director Talbot. As Jean mentioned, I'm going to walk through Regulation Chapter 44, which is basically the issuance of licenses, permits, stamps, preference points, our raffles, everything that comes out of the license section. So normally, we bring Chapter 44 to the Commission in July to make changes for any changes that the legislature approved that are effective immediately upon signature. And then once again, we usually bring it in September to make legislative changes that are approved to go into effect January 1 or other changes requested by the department. So this year is a little different. We're actually coming to the Commission in April to make some substantive changes to how we issue what we consider as leftover licenses that are remaining after the initial limited quota drawing is the major change in this regulation, and then there's a few other changes requested by the department as well. With that, we're going to clarify some definitions. As I mentioned, we're going to talk about a leftover draw and that process. And then we're going to clarify the non-resident quota for sandhill crane permits, clarify governor's complementary wild bison language where that's valid. We're going to clarify a cutoff date for pioneer applicants. And then we're going to clarify and make some changes, some corrections and clarifications to our super tag and our super tag trifecta drawings and the wild bison in that portion as well. So as I mentioned, the biggest change through this regulation is to reinstate a leftover draw. So the last time the Commission and Department did a leftover draw was in 2008. And after that, in 2009, we went to a first come, first served basis of any quota left over at the remainder after the initial draw. And so there's several considerations that the Department has heard since we instituted that. And the couple of the main reasons is, one, we hear a lot from our customers about the fair and equitable allocation of those leftover licenses. We turn them on at 8 o'clock in the morning on a certain day, so full price usually goes 1 week, and then any of our reduced price goes at 8 o'clock the following week. Well, that does require that customers usually take time off work and are available at that exact moment when those go on sale. The other thing we often hear is the inequity in internet speeds. Some of our customers have really good internet, or they do it at work where they have really high-speed internet, which gives them a greater advantage than maybe even some of our customers in Wyoming who have slower internet speeds. So we have heard that a lot. A lot of our sought-after licenses can be reserved in 30 seconds. And so if you have a slower internet speed, or maybe you're not as computer savvy, that does limit your opportunities. The other big reason is to reduce risk to the department, the commission, for system failures. These can come in several forms. Since we introduced the first come, first serve, the department has experienced 3 system failures with our credit card vendors. The first 2 were with our previous credit card vendor, Virtual Merchant, and most recently was last year with our new credit card vendor. No credit card vendor and no bank can assure you that their systems will operate and be up and running 100% of the time, specifically when you have thousands of people hitting a system within a 20-minute period. The department is open to other risks. We have a major F5 switch that comes into the state of Wyoming that runs all of the internet for the whole state. If that line is cut, it brings down our whole license system. That's 1 point failover. We can't control that. That won't happen. And so we're really trying to reduce those risks to the department. And we spend lots of investment in technology resources to operate for 2 days for basically 20 minutes of each of those days. Another consideration is department website access is impacted. We do put up a static web page when we do these leftover draws just to limit the number of traffic we have to our department website to allocate as much resource as we can to those leftover sales. The other thing is department personnel during that time is told basically please stay off of our resources that use technology, some of our internal programs, so that all of those resources are allocated to that leftover sale as well. So that can impact our department employees getting stuff done immediately on those certain days. And then we do experience communication difficulties if a problem does arise. When we do have a problem, our IT staff, our fiscal staff, our services division are intimately involved in trying to figure out why it happened and to resolve the issue. And so often we're wrapped up in that and we're not getting the communication out to the field, who is also getting callers saying that they're having trouble, they can't get through, and they don't know why either because we're trying to solve the problem. And it's very difficult to get all that communication out to everybody at one time. So those are the considerations and why we are suggesting to reinstate the leftover draw. So how would our limited quota licenses be obtained? All of the licenses that you guys just approved through the season setting process, how would those be obtained by our customers? So the first way our customers would be able to obtain those is through the initial limited quota drawing, which is the initial application period that most of our hunters take advantage of. And that's currently how we do it now. And basically we're inserting a second step in that. So that what we're requesting is to institute any licenses undersubscribed after the initial draw would then go forward into the leftover limited quota drawing. This would be both full price and reduced price licenses. And we would have another application period. And I'll explain some particulars about that in the next few slides. And then if we have any quota remaining after that, there are areas that that wildlife does propose that there's licenses available throughout the season to handle damage. So we are aware that we will have licenses available after the leftover draw, but we are hoping that most of them go in the leftover draw. So then we would have an issue after process as well. So I'm going to walk you through some definitions as to what, most of the changes that would implement through the leftover draw. Sorry, I'm missing a slide that I thought was right there. So bear with me a minute. I'm going to skip to the end because I don't know why this doesn't have this change in it. But I want to kind of go over how the leftover draw is going to work, and then I will go over all of these changes. So basically, we've created, okay, that's really good. So there's, in your handout, there's a section 22, which now has the new leftover draw that indicates how this process would work. And so what we're recommending is that we have a application period for this leftover draw that would start once we release the results in June. So once we release the elk, deer, and antelope draw, we would have the leftover draw. And so in that, it would be conducted for any license that we have left over for basically our big game species. So that would include antelope, bighorn sheep, deer, elk, moose, wild bison, mountain goat, if we have licenses remaining after the initial limited quota drawings. The application period would be determined on an annual basis by the fiscal division chief. This is similar to how the first come, first serve dates are determined. Those are also determined by the fiscal division chief. So we would leave that same process in place. And that all applications must be completed and the license be submitted during the application period. There would not be an application fee during this leftover draw. So our customers would not be required to submit another $14 application fee for non-residents or $5 for residents. So that part would not be included, but they would have to submit the license fees when they submit their application. Residents and non-residents would draw against the same quota. So we are proposing to not have the quota splits, 75-25 or 80-20, depending on the species that are applied in the initial draw. This would make it consistent with how the first come, first serve works. They would all draw against the same quota and they would have the same opportunity to draw. So they would not be affected that way. The other change that's a little different than the initial drawing is that we would allow residents and non-residents to apply together as a party. The party would still be limited to 6, but they could apply together. This would be similar to the first come, first serve, where they can reserve up to 6 licenses and those can be allocated to either resident or non-resident in the first come, first serve. They would be required to, in the party, have the same species, same hunt areas, in the same order, just like they are in the initial draw as well. And just as in the initial draw, all members would either receive their licenses or not, and if they didn't, they would receive refunds on their licenses. This would be done irregardless of preference points. We would not give an advantage to applicants with preference points, so we wouldn't look at their preference points and we would not take their preference points in this leftover draw. So it would be strictly a random draw based on their random number, so we wouldn't look at their preference points. And then just for some extra clarification, non-residents cannot submit an application for general elk or general deer. If there are leftover general region deer licenses, only non-residents could apply for those, but non-residents would not be able to apply for a general elk or general deer license. So those are basically how we would conduct the leftover draw and how we're proposing to have that done. So I can walk through the remainder of the slides about the leftover draw. So all of them that say leftover draw at the top are changes made throughout Chapter 44 to reinstate the leftover draw. And so a lot of it is clarification because we had just drawing. So we had to go in and clarify whether that was the initial draw or the leftover draw. So I'm going to walk through these pretty quickly. If you have a question on these changes, please stop me. So in party, Here we're saying that it has to be the same residency for the initial draw, because as I mentioned, in the leftover draw, residents and non-residents can apply together. Once again, party applications would expect the same results in the initial drawing. This just follows under because they had to apply with the same residency. Method of issuing licenses, we had to clarify in here and add leftover draw as well. And then licenses remaining after the initial or leftover draw would then become available on a first come, first served basis. To establish the number of licenses available for the leftover draw, we had to add that just to clarify that those are the licenses that were unsubscribed in the initial drawing. And that license selling agents must follow the issue after process. So a lot of these are just inserting whether it concerns the issue after process or the leftover draw or the initial limited quota drawing. So here, this is the split, the 75% split for special versus regular for antelope. So we just clarified that that only applies to the initial drawing. Same thing here. Initial drawing versus issue after. So there's a lot of changes. I'm just going to quickly flip through these. We have them in every one of our species. So this is doe, fawn. In this particular instance, we are striking some language that had just been remaining in there, just a cleanup process about how that quota is established. Bighorn sheep, same thing. We're just inserting the quota splits apply to the initial drawing. Same thing here for if we have ewe lamb licenses, just a cleanup of language that was in there from the past. The 75% for deer, inserting that quota applies to the initial drawing. And same thing about the non-resident regions, either issue after or leftover draw. Same thing here with doe fawn, just to clean up. There's several, any of the reduced price, there was that language in there that we're trying to clean up. This is the resident general licenses, will be available in the initial and leftover process as well. Elk, the quotas apply only in the initial drawing. And then this is, we had to really specify because the non-resident elk portion of the draw is done early, that this does apply just to the initial drawing for elk. It's a little different than the deer and antelope. So we did have to go in and clarify that as well. That's just the cleanup for the cow-calf. And some more resident elk clarification. Moose has the same insert of initial draw, and same with wild bison. We also did include here, in the last one is wild turkey. We did just say that wild turkey will be offered in the initial draw, and then those will go straight to an issue after process. We had to clarify leftover because the wild turkey will not go through the leftover draw. So that's a little bit different. We're not going to include those in the leftover draw. We had to include landowner licenses are only available and will be issued as landowner licenses in the initial draw as well. This is to clarify party applications in the initial draw. As I mentioned in the initial draw, it has to be resident specific when they're applying for a party as well. Some clarifications on just the closing dates for the initial draw and the application period. We have lots of dates and when those can be refunded. And then this is when through the ELS that the initial draw or the close of the application period identified in the tables only applies to the initial drawing. Here we had leftover, which was really the issue after licenses, so we did have to clarify that in the review board process, which is under the withdrawal or modification as well. So that really walks through the major changes and kind of just clarifying language throughout all of those sections of Chapter 44 to be very specific as to whether that applied to the initial limited quota drawing, the leftover drawing, or the issue after process. So those are the major changes to Chapter 44 to reinstate the leftover draw. As I mentioned, there's several other changes in here that I can walk through, or I can answer questions about the leftover draw, but I was just going to go through quickly the few other changes that I had mentioned.
One question. So this is going to eliminate the need for a contractor, correct?
Commission President, no, it does not eliminate the need for a contract. Are you talking our credit card vendor contractor?
Yes.
No, we will still maintain a credit card vendor. The credit card vendor processes all our credit card payments for all of our applications, all of our online sales. Eventually, they will also handle all of our sales through the department's IPOS systems. What it will do is eliminate that draw of 1,000 people trying to hit their system within the same, 5 minutes, 2 minutes. And that's where both of our credit card vendors have had that fail those 3 times that the department's experienced that failure.
So
because applicants, just like in the limited quota drawings, they submit applications throughout the whole application period, and it isn't a hit on our system, hundreds of people within seconds trying to hit the system. But we will still have our same credit card processor and vendor.
but it should eliminate a problem like we had, or an issue like we had last year.
Correct.
That's good, because as you well know, I was riding from Casper to Pinedale with our director when that happened. And when he wasn't on the phone screaming at somebody, he was screaming at me, and that was a long trip. And I don't want to see that happen again.
Mr. President, I don't want you to have to go through that, nor do we want to have to go through that, which is why we are proposing this change.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't do this so late in the day, but someone has decided as a policy matter that we should go to a leftover draw versus how we were doing it last year. So who made that decision? And now you're asking us to approve it, but who made that decision and why was it made? I mean, was it just that we have a bunch of people trying to pound into our internet and our credit card vendor can't handle it, and so now we're going to do this draw?
Commission President, Commissioner Crank, as I mentioned, the department has heard lots of different things about the first come first serve process that we had done in the past, whether it was inequities from our customers. We had outfitters complain about the inequities, but also one part of that was the risk and problems we've had with 3 times now with credit card vendors. But we also are always concerned about the risk to the department for, like I mentioned, that F5 switch. If somebody goes out and a contractor cuts a line when they're doing work at some other area, that stops our first come first serve.
That could happen today, irregardless of whether we have a leftover draw or we have a first come first serve system.
That is correct, and we do have things in place to, if we have a problem during an application process, there are things in Chapter 44 that allow the department, if we come up against those issues, to extend the deadline. So that is a much easier process to manage with our customers than in the instance of the credit card failure, trying to contact all of those customers, trying to find out those customers that were affected. And just to eliminate that risk and that time that was spent trying to manage and address those issues and do what was most fair and equitable to our customers, as well as to what was right by the department. And so after
Mr.
that
President, I don't mean to be rude, but you just gave me a bunch of reasons why this is a better deal. Who made the call to go to this system? I mean, was it Mr. Talbot? Was it Gene Cole? Was it? I'm just curious, who decided to make this change?
So after this happened, staff got together, Fiscal Division, Gene Cole, Scott Cochran from the Services Division, met with the Director's Office and staff to see what was the best proposal to move forward.
So, Mr. Talbot, you're comfortable that this is the way to go?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, after that last disaster that we had with our licensing contractor and the amount of work that took and the amount of frustration on behalf of the public, this is a staff recommendation from all of the folks at staff at Game and Fish to try to develop another system that is more foolproof than the last one. And Commissioner Crank, you'll recall that last year, I think, was the third year that our credit card vendor has failed us on that. And as Jennifer has pointed out, that even Google, when you have thousands of hits on those credit card vendors at one time, they fail. And we haven't been able to get around that. Google hasn't been able to get around that. But the public doesn't understand that that's not game and fish. That's a game and fish problem. And this is a proposal from staff of the department to the commission to try to find another way to allocate those licenses and minimize those problems.
Mr. President, following up on that, and backing up, then why did we go to the first come, first serve in the first place?
President Culver, Commissioner Anselmi, when we first started our ELS system in 2007 and 2008, the department felt it was probably the best way to have customer service, where instead of having all of our manual license documents across the state for our vendors to sell handwritten licenses, we automated our licensing system on the ELS system, and we had an opportunity to have licenses available through that process. And over the years, when we first started that system, it took us a couple years to get a lot of the bugs worked out, and had some difficulties getting that started. And then since then, as Jennifer and Director Talbot have mentioned, there's been 3 different times that we've had real issues with our credit card vendor processing those applications in a very short period of time, the sales. And so the point that I'd really like to make is that through regulation, if there is an issue on a deadline date, because we're talking now about a deadline date and not just a 3-minute or a 5-minute time frame where we're trying to get licenses issued in a short period of time. So if it's an application deadline and there's a problem with our system, then in regulation we have the opportunity to extend the deadline to the next business day at 5 p.m. Or if it requires more than 1 day to correct a problem or an issue, we can extend it to another business day. So in the initial rollout of our licensing systems, we were trying to accommodate customer service and getting opportunity across the whole state for our customers to buy licenses. And it's been a real challenge to meet that desire for our customers.
Yeah, so the question was, why did we go to the first come, first serve? This seems a lot fairer, and this is the way it used to be too. And then why did we go to the first come, first serve?
We just felt that it was a better way to allocate licenses for customers, for them to go to their local vendors or to get on the internet. It was just a direction the department went to with rolling out an automated licensing system. Prior to that time, we had manual license sales, and we wanted to offer that opportunity through an automated system, and we chose to do it in that manner. Just trying to make a change with technology, and it's been very difficult to use that technology with those credit card vendors.
Thank you.
So I'm going to walk quickly through the other changes in Chapter 44 that we made while we had Chapter 44 open and out to public comment. So the first one is we are just making a clarification and cleaning up the definition of permit, which means a document that authorizes a license holder to carry out the activities. So just a more clear definition. And then throughout the next couple of slides, we did put in, instead of just applications, we changed that to completed applications based on the definitions that applications must be completed. So you'll see that change on a few slides throughout the next few. We did also clarify seine and trap licenses can only be issued at either department regional offices or headquarters through the ELS system. Previously it said just through the ELS system, which led customers to believe they could pick that up at any of our license selling agents or online, which is not true. Those are issued only at department or headquarter offices. So we did clean up that language as well. This one is related to how we issue limited quota sandhill crane permits. And previously, It said 80% go to residents. We just flipped this. It's the same split. It's an 80-20 split, but it just it matches how the draw is conducted. So we do the non-resident portion first. That way any quota remaining just rolls into the residents, and we only have to do that portion once. And then we did also add in the initial draw. It is not our intent to have a leftover license process for sandhill crane permits. This has to do with hunters with shoot from vehicle permits. The new title of the permit is shoot from vehicle. Previously it was hunters with qualifying disability permit. So we are just changing the language in regulation to match the actual permit title. This change is in regard to the Springer permits. We're just clarifying that those permits, any unissued permits, are valid either until the quota has been reached or the permit is no longer valid. So that's just a clarification on that as well. So there's a couple changes both to the super tag trifecta and the governor's license that I mentioned in regards to wild bison licenses. So we are adding a provision that the complementary wild bison licenses are not valid in wild bison areas with a quota of 10 or less licenses. So this is similar. We have a provision for moose and bighorn sheep as well in the governor's licenses and the trifecta. For those species, it's 8 and 10. So we did add a provision for wild bison that had to clarify that as well, that license wouldn't be valid in hunt areas with less than 10. This is a change to our Pioneer license application, specifying a specific date for which a applicant has to be that they can apply is by June 20th of the calendar year to be qualified as a Pioneer. Previously, it was set as a tentative published date in our hunting application booklet and on our system. And since we are going to the leftover draw, as we move forward with trying to get our application booklet out in different manners, we wanted to set a specific date. So this is the date that was consistent with the date we had used previously. We are just now identifying that in this regulation.
If I may, I need to interject something here. I just found out that we're required to be out of this room at 5 o'clock, which is 8 minutes away, and we have 3 members of the public that would like to address us. So I don't know if we want to try to rush through this and get this chapter done, or if we want to continue this till tomorrow. How much more do we have left on this?
Just a couple things. I can quickly go through this, but it's up to you guys. I do know that we had 2 people who were going to make a public comment that I do want to make sure you guys are aware of a change that's not presented in the slide, and make sure I committed to them to bring their comments forward to you.
I'm wondering if we should continue this discussion until tomorrow, Jennifer?
That would be fine. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be here anyways.
Okay.
So I think that would give you guys time to fully vent this and address this.
I really hate to cut you off in the middle of your presentation, but if we could stop right here, and then we'll continue this tomorrow, because I know there's some questions from the commission. And so, thank you, Jennifer. Again, I'm sorry to do that to you.
That's okay. Thank you, Commissioner President.
So, we have 3 members of the public that would like to visit with us, and first I'll call Spencer Amond. There's these business cards, if you'd pass those down.
Thank you, President Culver. I'm not here to ask y'all for anything. I'm here as a representative of the Wyoming Flycasters to thank you for your consideration the last several years and the fact that you have allowed us to receive commission tags. And I want to just tell you a bit about what we are doing with the funds that have come from those. And as everybody says, I will try to be brief. But we have spent over $250,000 over the last decade on conservation projects, and many of those have been in conjunction with and in partnership with the Game and Fish Department. $90,000 for Cardwell, and $19,000 at Spees. I don't know if many of you know that there had to be some additional money go into the Spees deal because of what limitations on expenditure of government funds, and so we kind of made up the difference. And we spent about $40,000 in conjunction with other partners on access in the North Platte. The projects that we selected to fund, or we solicited projects last year, as opposed to sitting and waiting on projects to walk through the door. We actively solicited projects and came up with 34, of which we were only able to fund about a half a dozen. But the ones that we did fund, I want to indicate that we spent some money around the state as well as locally. Our top priority was LaBarge Creek, and second was some equipment that the aquatic people needed. Third, we did a project learning tree workshop and put some money into Spees access, improved access there. And then fifth was Encampment River Watershed. There's a partnership that we're involved with down there that we certainly don't pay the whole freight, but and then we put some money into Access Yes. And in addition to money, we also get out and get our hands dirty. The last weekend, we had 8 people work for 2 days of our members, along with people at Spees. And if you haven't been out there recently to see the improvements that are going on, I encourage you to take a look at that. And that's all the time I'll take, but I would like to pass out these little flyers on the Wyoming Flycasters. And then I would invite my partner, Derek Dietz, who one of the things that we do that I skipped over, Wyoming Flycasters is the local sponsor of the project that Derek is going to tell you about for a little bit. And so I'll step aside and hopefully get out of here before we get thrown out.
Thank you, Spencer. And Spencer, I really want to show our appreciation for what you've done to help us. I didn't realize that you'd kicked in that much money on the local hatchery here on Spees. And again, thank you for the other projects and also for your help last year with WAFWA. Greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can just get these real quick out here.
Thank you.
Get out of the way.
Thank you. Derek? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President Culver, Director Talbert, members of the commission. Again, I am Derek Dietz. I am the regional coordinator for Project Healing Waters fly fishing. I am also the program lead for the Casper program itself of Project Healing Waters. Project Healing Waters is a program that's dedicated to the emotional and physical rehabilitation of injured veterans and disabled veterans, injured active duty service members through fly fishing and fly fishing related activities. Members of the commission have seen fit over the past several years to help our program by distributing a commissioner's tag for us, and my primary purpose here today is to say thank you and to give you an opportunity to ask any questions about our program that you might have. Briefly, our program is sponsored by Wyoming Flycasters. Their sponsorship of our program is primarily in volunteer services. They don't necessarily provide money for us, but they make sure that we have educated flycasters to help our new flycasters when we take them out to the field. We also use fly tying, rod building, and I have one of our participants today, Cody Lewis, that he has something real quick for you. But primarily I wanted to say thank you and give you the opportunity to give you the opportunity to ask me any questions you might have about our program. Cody?
Just wanted to thank the members of the commission for, helping veterans and soldiers like myself, to help rehabilitate us and be, where we love to be. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Cody, and thanks for coming today.
Cody, thank you for your service.
Absolutely.
Our program also works with other veteran-related organizations, such as Hunting with Heroes, an organization y'all are probably pretty familiar with, in that we both have the goal to help the soldiers and disabled veterans, and we've worked very well together over the past 5 years, getting those programs up and running. Our Casper program, since inception, has run 130 disabled veterans through the program. We have a core operational group of between 30 and 35 that we work with every summer. The program's been very successful. Nationally, we are up to over 216 local programs under the umbrella of the headquarters, but each of those local programs is responsible for its own fundraising and program development. So it's a great opportunity for us to help the folks that are involved. If you have any questions that I can answer, I can also be available after the meeting if you'd like. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek. Last up, Eric. Eric On, is it? Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
It's Ani.
Ani, okay.
Good evening. Sorry to be so late and be the heel, but I'm
fine.
actually coming with less good news than Derek and the Flycasters. What I'm here about is the peg bead or the trout bead issue. I guess, and I'll make it really quick, and I know your meeting is coming up. We'll be dealing with fishing regulations, but this regulation versus state statute, I guess, I feel is just not consistent. I'm an outfitter. I could stand to make a fair amount of profit from this, but I don't allow my guys to fish this way. It has a lot more impact on the trout than I think people are giving it credit for. We're telling people that it's okay to snag fish when the state statute is saying we cannot snag fish. So I'm just here to show you kind of this rig. I'm not sure if you're aware of these. Have you guys seen these rigs? How they're set up? This is a pretty typical rig that's being employed right now. Fish eats the bead. Bead is pulled out of the fish's mouth. Hook is punctured into the side of the face. Which, in this instance, the fish is not willingly taking the hook into its mouth. So that's all I have for you. I'm just hoping that you guys might reconsider the regulation that's on the books now. Any questions?
Mr. President, I shouldn't do this, but we changed this just recently. How did we change it, and why isn't that effective? Didn't we deal with this last spring?
Yes. So the regulation is now basically what initially happened when this became an issue, and I have memos to if you'd like those memos. The Game and Fish Department issued a memo that said this is considered snagging, and this is not allowed. So at that rate, they said you had to put the bead on the hook, and that was okay, because the fish will at some way have to take that into its mouth. And then the next memo that came out a month later, it said, well, they're trying to allow the bead issue to go forward. So they said, well, this now has to be a fly. So it had to be a fly, so they couldn't determine whether it was actually being snagged or whether it was being foul hooked by eating the fly. Last year, the regulation went through that now said this is considered an artificial lure. The interesting thing about the regulation in the fishing regulations is directly above it says snagging is illegal, but this is considered a lure.
Okay.
It seems pretty contradictory to the statute to me. Anyways, that's.
Mr. Crank, or Mr. President, members of the commission, Commissioner Crank, certainly when this was first brought to the department's attention, that bead would slide a long distance along that, and the hook would hook the fish anywhere from close to the gills clear back to the tail. And Eric's correct that the regulation now requires it to be within 2 inches of the hook. And so that eliminated, or supposedly eliminated, snagging through the side of the fish or in the gills.
So you're proposing we don't allow beads at all?
Absolutely. Yeah, and the state statute says a fish must willingly take the hook into its mouth or else it is considered snagging. In this instance, the fish is not taking the hook willingly into its mouth.
Does the bead stay there?
It is taking the bead. Well, this is just a loop around leader. You can peg it, which is a common term, is peg bead. Now the beads are not the only thing that are being pegged. Chenille, just a chunk of chenille, which is San Juan worm, is being tied to the leader. Same things. They're using chenille, they're using pine squirrel to imitate leeches, all sorts of different things to imitate bait that the fish is putting in their mouth. Then it's being pulled out and snagged with the hook.
I thank you for coming here today. I think you've piqued the interest of some of the commission, and I'm sure we will be more aware of this when it comes before us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we will go ahead and adjourn for tonight, and public session will begin at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you.
Dinner at 6:30. Dinner at 6:30 at Armour's.